Hey guys, tonight we start in the high deserts of Peru, where something downright weird stretches across the ground in stubborn silence. From the sky, it's obvious, strange lines, animals, spirals, and arrows etched across 200 square miles of arid plateau. But from the ground, just dirt, rocks, dust. You could hike right across a giant hummingbird and not notice a thing. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're watching from somewhere far away, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how global this sleepy little channel has become. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're gliding low over the Nazca Desert, wind in your face, silence all around. Below you stretch perfect geometric patterns, lines that seem laser-cut running dead straight for miles. Some form vast triangles, others spirals, and still others, stunningly accurate depictions of monkeys, condors, even a man with what appears to be an astronaut helmet. The largest of these drawings spans over 1,200 feet, big enough to swallow 4 football fields. No one knows exactly who carved these into the desert crust. The mainstream story points to the Nazca people, who lived here from around 100 BCE to 800 CE. They had no drones, no hot air balloons, no satellite view, and yet they made art that only makes sense from the sky. Which, if you're being honest, sounds like designing a billboard for birds. You walk the dusty paths now, and the air is heavy with the scent of baked rock and parched earth. Your shoes crunch over pebbles that haven't moved in centuries. You pass through a straight line cut through the desert varnish, just a few inches deep, but so clean you'd swear someone used a giant razor. And here's the kicker. The lines have barely eroded over 1,000 years. That's not normal. Desert winds should have smeared them long ago. Some archaeologists believe they were ritual walkways, a kind of spiritual path walked during ceremonies. Others think they were astronomical charts, aligning with solstices or the rising of particular stars. Still others, shrugging deeply, guess some sort of alien landing strip, which, while fun to say, doesn't explain the llama-shaped ones. Here's the fringe bit. In the 1960s, a German mathematician named Maria Reich spent decades living in a shack next to the lines. She became their champion, climbing towers and mapping out the figures with a passion bordering on obsession. She insisted the designs had astronomical significance, and that they acted as a kind of massive celestial calendar. But even she couldn't explain how the ancient Nazca people made them so perfectly without seeing them from above. Now imagine you're a Nazca artisan 1,500 years ago, in sandals and a woven tunic, working out the wing curve of a giant pelican using only ropes, wooden stakes, and your own 2 eyeballs. No GPS, no blueprint, and if you mess up, you'd never know, because again, you can't see the final product. That's like painting the Mona Lisa while blindfolded and lying down. Historians still argue whether these figures were meant for gods in the sky, astronomical maps, irrigation markers, or some now-lost cultural expression. None of the theories fit all the data. The animal shapes don't align to stars. The geometric lines don't point to water sources consistently. And if they were just art, why hide them from human eyes? Then there's the weird weather. This part of Peru almost never sees rain. Some years get less than half an inch. That's part of why the lines have lasted. They simply don't get washed away. You think about that as you kneel next to one. It's not even a trench, just a scraped line in oxidized soil. It would take you 10 minutes to recreate it, and 10,000 years to justify it. And get this, in 2020, researchers using drone imagery discovered new figures no one had noticed before. One, hilariously, appears to be a lounging cat, etched into a hillside. How does a 120-foot cat drawing go unnoticed for centuries? Probably the same way most of the desert's secrets do. We just stop looking. Local lore has its own ideas. In Andean cosmology, the lines are Sikhs, sacred pathways connecting spiritual power points. Pilgrimages would follow them, sometimes barefoot, to honor mountain spirits or ancestral gods. You can almost hear the chant of sandals on gravel, the rhythm of offerings placed carefully along the way. Then you wonder, what if they're all of those things? Sacred paths, celestial calendars, artworks meant for divine eyes. Not everything needs a single label. Maybe that's the whole problem. Science wants precision, but mystery thrives on contradiction. You dust your hands off, squinting into the setting sun. Somewhere out there, more shapes are hiding beneath sand and scrub, waiting to be seen from just the right angle. And you, little desert traveler, are walking straight through history's favorite optical illusion. Better watch your step. You might be trampling an alien penguin. You're still blinking desert dust out of your eyes when the next landscape unfurls. This time it's Egypt. The sun is a molten coin above the horizon, and ahead looms the familiar triangle of the Great Pyramid of Giza. But tonight, you're not just gaping at its symmetry. You're here to listen, to the wind scraping ancient stone, to the thousand-year arguments echoing off the limestone walls, and to the quiet voice in your head whispering, "Wait a second. This doesn't add up." You're not alone. You walk alongside archaeologists, geologists, mystics, and, of course, every fifth internet guy with a theory and a beard. Everyone's trying to answer the same question. How old is this thing, really? The official story goes like this. Pharaoh Khufu, 4th dynasty, around 2560 BCE. That's when the pyramid was supposedly built. By a highly organized workforce, not slaves. Historians are very clear on that point. Over a span of roughly 20 years. A staggering achievement, sure. 2 million stone blocks, some weighing 80 tons, stacked with such precision you can't slide a credit card between them. But as you step closer, the air turns thick. The stones don't feel like part of history. They feel older than history. You press your hand to the base, where time has chewed away at the soft limestone. And that's where the first real crack in the story appears. Erosion. See, geologist Robert Schoch shook the academic pyramid when he pointed out that the Sphinx, and possibly the base of the Great Pyramid, shows signs of water erosion. Not wind, not sand. Water. Heavy, sustained rainfall. The kind Egypt hasn't seen since, well, before 5000 BCE. That's thousands of years before Khufu, before writing, before your morning cup of coffee would even exist as a concept. Historians still argue whether this erosion is due to ancient rainfall, rising groundwater, or just the slow grind of sandstorms. But the weather timeline just doesn't sit right. If the erosion came from rain, then the pyramid, or at least its foundation, is far older than officially allowed. That would mean advanced builders were here long before dynastic Egypt even had a dynasty to boast about. You circle the structure, each side almost perfectly aligned to true north. No compass, no GPS, just mathematical precision baked into 5,000-year-old stone. The thing is basically a fossilized calculator, and even now we don't totally understand how they pulled it off. Every time someone thinks they've solved it, ramps, levers, counterweights, another problem pops up like a whack-a-mole made of granite. Here's a fringe detail for your pocket. Some claim the Great Pyramid isn't just a tomb, which, by the way, has no body inside, but a kind of energy generator. Not in the sci-fi Tesla coil way, more like the pyramid's shape and materials resonate with Earth's natural frequencies. Quartz-lined chambers, water channels deep below, weird acoustics. It sounds ridiculous until you step inside and hum. The echo is bone deep. And speaking of insides, you crawl your way into the so-called King's Chamber. It's quiet, too quiet. A granite box sits in the middle, lid long gone. You sit on its edge and wonder, who built this place to last so long, and why so little ornamentation? No hieroglyphs, no flashy wall art, just precision stonework. If Khufu made this, where's the pharaoh-level flair? Then there's the Orion theory, which has to make an appearance here. Some researchers, mostly independent ones, the kind universities avoid at lunch, point out that the 3 main pyramids of Giza align with the 3 stars of Orion's belt. Not only that, but the alignment supposedly matches the sky as it looked around 10,500 BCE. Again, way before Egypt officially got its historical act together. Coincidence? Probably. Maybe. Possibly. But when you stand there at dawn, watching Orion wink above the horizon while the pyramid's shadow stretches across sand older than civilization, it doesn't feel random. You stumble out into the light, a little dizzy. The desert's playing tricks on your brain. But the questions remain. Why build something so colossal, so perfect, just to bury one man? And did they even bury anyone at all? The pyramid has no formal inscriptions. That's like building the Louvre and forgetting to hang any paintings. Mainstream Egyptology holds its line. This is a tomb, full stop. They'll tell you the lack of hieroglyphs just reflects Khufu's minimalist taste. But fringe researchers argue it was a repository of ancient knowledge. A beacon, a time capsule, or worse, something built by a lost civilization, remembered only in whispers and half-erased myths. And maybe the weirdest fact of all? We still don't fully understand how it was built. You'd think with 3D scans, LiDAR, and the collective brains of 1,000 PhDs, someone could explain it start to finish. But no, the best we've got are reasonable guesses. It's like reverse engineering a smartphone using a rock and a spoon. So here you are, standing before a structure that defies erosion timelines, ignores traditional burial decor, and keeps beating laser alignment tests even in 2025. It's ancient, yes, but maybe not in the way the textbooks say. You squint up at the tip, wondering if anyone ever actually stood there, and what they saw, and whether they whispered to themselves, just like you, what is this thing really for? Maybe the answers were never lost. Maybe we've just been looking with the wrong eyes. You're still blinking sunlight off the Giza stones when the scenery shifts again. This time, to somewhere even older, stranger, and drenched in myth. You're not walking now. You're sitting cross-legged, barefoot, firelight flickering on your face, as a robed elder turns ancient pages beside you. The script is flowing, curly, utterly unreadable. Sanskrit. And what it's saying. Oh, just a casual mention of flying machines, city-leveling weapons, and wars fought in the sky. Welcome to the world of Vimanas, mythological flying crafts that show up again and again in India's oldest sacred texts. You flip through the Mahabharata, and there it is, a chariot that flies with the speed of the wind. Or the Ramayana, where Ravana's flying palace, the Pushpaka Vimana, cruises through the air like some airborne Uber, fully equipped with throne seating and mood lighting, probably. Now, the scholarly crowd says these are just poetic metaphors. You know, ancient people describing divine events using their best available imagery, horses pulling chariots in the clouds and all that. But some fringe thinkers read these lines and raise their eyebrows so high they disappear into their hairline. Because the texts get weirdly specific. One passage describes a weapon that produced a column of smoke and flame, as bright as 10,000 suns. The aftermath? Elephants screaming, birds falling from the sky, food turning poisonous. Historians still argue whether these descriptions are metaphorical flourishes or literal accounts distorted by time. But you can't deny it, this doesn't sound like your average Bronze Age battlefield. It sounds like nukes. And the dates? That's the spicy part. These epics were first written down around 500 BCE, but the oral traditions behind them could stretch back thousands of years further. So if you believe some of the fringe theories, and let's be honest, you're here for the mysteries, then these texts might be describing not just mythic events but forgotten technologies. A fringe scholar named David Davenport claimed the ancient city of Mohenjo-Daro, part of the Indus Valley civilization, shows evidence of a nuclear event. Buildings collapsed from an epicenter. Skeletons found holding hands in the streets, as if death came instantly. Radioactive residue reportedly lingered in the area. That's the story, anyway. Mainstream archaeology disagrees. Strongly. They argue the damage is typical of time and climate, and that the radiation levels are negligible. Still, it's hard to shake the eerie vibe of a city frozen mid-action. You run your fingers over a diagram from the Samarangana Sutradhara, an ancient Sanskrit text attributed to King Bhoja. This one lays out instructions for building a flying machine. Actual build specs: a strong and durable mercury iron engine, with properly welded joints. Mercury? Check. Fire chambers? Yup. The text warns the user to avoid flying near birds, lest the birds ignite. Is it all metaphor? Maybe. A bad translation? That's possible too. But even if these machines never physically existed, why do so many cultures describe flying craft in their ancient records? Not just India. We're talking pre-Columbian Mesoamerican glyphs, Sumerian tablets, even Egyptian carvings that vaguely resemble helicopters, depending on how badly you want them to. You lean back against the stone temple wall. Overhead, bats squeak and flutter through the eaves. You try to imagine a world where early humans coexisted with some pre-technological civilization, or a surviving remnant of one. A high-tech culture that burned out in fire and smoke, leaving behind only cryptic texts and myth-drenched memories. Modern researchers scoff at this, and rightly so. It's hard to test a flying machine from a 1,000-year-old scroll when the ingredients list includes magical fire and spinning power crystals. But skeptics also admit the knowledge of metallurgy, astronomy, and geometry found in early Indian texts is advanced. Not just clever villager with a stick advanced. More like, wait, how did they know that? For example, ancient Indian astronomers calculated lunar cycles with stunning precision. The Surya Siddhanta, an astronomical text from at least the 4th century CE, possibly older, describes Earth's diameter, the tilt of its axis, and planetary orbits with uncanny accuracy. The numbers don't always match ours exactly, but they're close enough to be deeply weird. You sip something warm, tea, maybe, and watch the flames. Your guide begins to recite verses in a language older than most mountains. And while the logic part of your brain knows this is mythology, another part, the dreamier part, can't stop asking, what if there's a memory buried in the myth? A blurry echo of a real event, too ancient for our timelines, too fantastic for our textbooks. And here's your quirky tidbit for the night. India's space agency, ISRO, actually named one of their rocket programs Vimana. Cheeky, right? It's like NASA launching Project Pegasus, because Greek myths had flying horses. A little wink to the past, just in case the past was smarter than we think. You lie back, eyes tracing stars that haven't changed in millennia. Somewhere out there, across the dark and silence, a memory waits. Maybe not of aliens, maybe not of gods, but of people who knew things we've forgotten. And maybe, just maybe, one of them wrote it down in Sanskrit. Don't worry, you're not about to be abducted. Probably. The night deepens, and with it, the terrain around you starts to change. Gone are the warm winds of the Indian subcontinent. You feel the air thin and cool, pressing against your cheeks like the breath of something ancient and waiting. You're high in the Andes now, perched on a narrow ledge beside what can only be described as a wall built by time-traveling engineers, Sacsayhuaman. No, you didn't sneeze. That's really what it's called. And while it might sound like a lost Star Wars character, what you're looking at is very, very real. Massive stone blocks, some as heavy as a school bus, fit together like pieces of a puzzle without mortar. Not even a razor blade can slide between them. You run your hand along one of the smooth surfaces. No chisel marks, no obvious tool traces, just perfectly interlocking shapes, cut at multiple angles, as if someone had access to a CAD program and a giant 3D printer. Mainstream historians agree that the Incas built this site, most likely in the 15th century. It's the official story, and it makes sense, except, of course, for all the parts that don't. Like the fact that even the Incas themselves apparently said the site predated them. They claim to have found it, not built it, which is kind of like your friend showing up with a Tesla and going, "Yeah, I didn't make it, I just added stickers." Historians still argue whether the more massive megalithic structures were Inca-built or the work of a much earlier civilization. Because let's be real, we know how the Incas worked stone. Their later structures are impressive but clearly more rustic. You can see the evolution in reverse. Smaller stones, less precision. It's like finding the iPhone and then a flip phone after it, and being told that's technological progress. The fringe crowd, never ones to miss a party, have a theory. Several, actually. Some suggest the use of softening stones with mysterious plant compounds that allowed them to mold boulders like clay. Others talk about sound technology, using harmonics to vibrate stone into place. Sounds absurd, until you remember that sound, at the right frequency, can shatter glass or levitate small objects in a lab. So maybe absurdity is just unfamiliar science in a different hat. You pause in front of the famous zigzagging walls. They look like lightning frozen in stone. The shape isn't just decorative, it was meant to deflect earthquakes. And guess what? It works. Peru's been rattled by some serious quakes, but Sacsayhuaman? Still standing tall, while more modern structures crumble like week-old cake. You take a step back and notice something else. The site is built on a hill with a panoramic view of the valley below. Not just any hill, it looks engineered, sculpted, and those odd stone outcroppings nearby. Some say they resemble worn-down landing pads or star maps, or, very tired llamas. Depends on your lighting. Here's a fun fact. The stones at Sacsayhuaman weren't dragged from nearby. Some of them came from over 20 miles away. Uphill, over mountain terrain, without wheels, just ropes, ramps, and maybe a whole lot of shouting. Mainstream archaeologists suggest large labor forces and clever use of inclined planes. But even they admit no one's really replicated it at that scale. Try hauling a 100-ton rock today and see how far you get before the crane operator quits. And then there's the strange, out-of-place marks etched into some of the stones. Deep circular holes, narrow slots, grooves that serve no obvious structural purpose. Some think they were part of a locking system. Others believe they're the remnants of tools or machines long since lost to time or looters. But the oddest part? The wear. Some of these stones look melted, as if exposed to intense heat or pressure that softened their edges, giving them that almost organic, blobby contour. You can't help but wonder, what melts stone without leaving burn marks or blackening? And why would someone want to? The sun begins to rise behind the distant peaks, casting gold over the ancient ruins. You notice the site is aligned with astronomical markers just like Giza, just like Stonehenge, just like too many of these places that supposedly had no contact with each other. What's up with that? Here's your quirky tidbit for this leg of the journey. Some tour guides in Peru whisper that deep beneath Sacsayhuaman, there are sealed tunnels that stretch for miles. They're said to connect to other sacred sites, even Machu Picchu itself. People have gotten lost down there, never to return. Officials deny these stories, of course, but you get the feeling that if you pried up the right stone, you might just fall into a secret older than empire. So what's the truth behind Sacsayhuaman? A mighty Inca fortress? A ceremonial site with astronomical significance? A relic of a pre-Inca civilization with stone-shaping tech we can't reproduce today? Or let's go full dreamer here. Is it a piece of something much bigger? A leftover from a civilization wiped out by cataclysm, remembered only as gods by those who came after. You don't have the answers, but your fingertips are still tingling from touching that wall, and your ears are still echoing with the quiet thunder of stones that have outlived kings, wars, and every theory we've thrown at them. Keep walking. The Andes aren't done with you yet. The earth trembles beneath your feet, but gently, like something very, very big just rolled over in its sleep. You blink and find yourself standing atop an endless plain. Dry grass rustles in the wind, the horizon hazy with dust and time. Welcome to the Kazakh steppe, where the only thing older than the wind is the mystery you've come to explore. The steppe geoglyphs, massive shapes carved into the ground, visible only from the sky, and forgotten by history for, well, basically forever. You'd think we'd know about massive land drawings by now, right? We've got satellites, after all. And yet, these geoglyphs were only discovered in 2007 by a Kazakh economist who was casually scrolling Google Earth. Not an archaeologist, not a pilot, just a guy browsing from his laptop. And suddenly, bam, there they were. Huge geometric figures stretching across northern Kazakhstan, etched into the land like ancient digital icons. From your bird's eye view, don't worry, you didn't grow wings. You're just hovering in a very dreamlike, non-fatal way. You can make them out clearly. Circles, crosses, squares, even a swastika-like shape older than its 20th century hijacking, of course. Some look like solar symbols, others like primitive calendars, and a few, well, they don't look like anything we're used to. One even resembles a giant key, or maybe a circuit board. Historians still argue whether these were ceremonial sites, tribal markers, or ancient message boards for the gods, or maybe aliens. Because if you want to make a case for alien post-it notes, this is prime territory. Here's the kicker. Some of these shapes are larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza. You'd need scaffolding, cranes, or drones to even design them properly, Except, they were made somewhere between 2,000 and 8,000 years ago, long before there were blueprints, or planes, or Pinterest boards. So how did ancient people make enormous, mathematically precise patterns they couldn't even see from ground level? Mainstream archaeology suggests they used basic surveying techniques, stakes, ropes, and some serious patience. The old-fashioned walk 200 paces that way, then make a left strategy. It's not impossible, but it is suspiciously perfect. Fringe theorists, naturally, propose everything from lost anti-gravity tech to sky gods teaching geometry. But some go subtler, suggesting ancient peoples had methods of high-elevation observation, like kites or hot air balloons, or even tall observation mounds now eroded by time. Unlikely? Sure. But a world where someone decided to spend decades carving shapes into the dirt for reasons we still don't understand is already pretty unlikely. You kneel beside one of the lines. Just a trench, shallow and dry, but etched clean and precise. The soil here is iron-rich, and when you drag your fingers through it, you swear it vibrates. Probably your imagination. Probably your guide. A stoic Kazakh herder who appeared without explanation. Points to the sky. That one, he says in a thick accent, is the Ushtigay Square. You look up. Sure enough, a perfect square pattern looms in satellite imagery. My grandmother said it keeps the bad spirits away. He smiles, then vanishes into the fog. Totally normal dream stuff. Here's your quirky tidbit. The geoglyphs have no folklore. None. The locals didn't even know they were there. That's weird, right? Usually, ancient sites get wrapped up in legend. Cursed tombs, giant gods, magical guardians. But here, just silence. As if even memory forgot they existed. The Kazakh government has since tried to preserve them, now that the world's watching. But the truth is, most people haven't even heard of these shapes. They're not in textbooks. They're not on travel shows. They're just out here, whispering to satellites. One scholar proposed they might have been sky calendars, tools for tracking solstices or star alignments. Others think they mark trade routes or tribal territories. But why make them so large? Why make them visible only from the air? And why, this is the real stumper, are they still so precise after thousands of years? Nature is not gentle with things like this. The wind here could shave your eyebrows off if you nap too long. Yet the shapes persist. Some faded, some weathered, but unmistakably intentional. You walk the perimeter of one spiral-shaped formation, the sun dipping low behind your back. The silence is immense. No birds, no insects, just the sigh of the land remembering something you've never known. Let's take a small detour for comparison. The famous Nazca lines in Peru. You've probably heard of them. Giant animal shapes scratched into the desert. Well, the steppe geoglyphs are older, possibly by thousands of years. But while the Nazca designs are often mythic, monkeys, birds, lizards, these Kazakh shapes are coldly geometric. Almost digital. Like they're saying, we weren't here to tell stories. We were here to measure something. Could it have been a map? A message? A way to stabilize energy? Some have suggested the lines may align with magnetic fields or underground water currents, like acupuncture for the planet. Laugh if you want, but it's no stranger than carving a 300-foot spider into a desert and never mentioning why. You pause at the center of a cross-like figure. A breeze tugs at your shirt. You feel the faintest pull, like gravity is thinner here, or maybe you're just dizzy from the altitude. Either way, the land feels awake. There's still so much we don't know. Excavations are slow, funding is tight, and every answer seems to raise a dozen new questions. Like who built them, and why? And why so far from where civilization was supposed to be? But here's the thing, maybe this was civilization. Maybe what we call the middle of nowhere was once the heart of something. A hub for observation, communication, or even worship by people we've forgotten, using tools we didn't think existed yet. Or maybe they were just really into giant line art. Who knows? The sky darkens. The geoglyph beneath you fades into the night. But it's still there, massive, quiet, perfect. And now it's in your memory, too. You feel like you've glimpsed the tip of a truth buried so deep, only the stars remember the rest. You shake the step dust from your sleeves as the world around you shifts once again. The wind warms, the scent of salt and ancient stone fills your lungs, and before you know it, you're standing on a windswept Greek hillside. Beneath your feet lies Pumapunku, except, plot twist, it doesn't. You're actually in Bolivia now. Gotcha. Geography's weird like that in dream space. This is where things get seriously head-scratching. Pumapunku isn't just a fun name to say. It's one of the most confounding sights on Earth. You're staring at shattered monoliths strewn across a high-altitude plateau in the Andes. Like a giant toddler got mad and flipped the world's most complicated Lego set. The site is part of the Tiwanaku complex, which most archaeologists date to around 500 to 1000 AD. The Tiwanaku civilization was advanced in irrigation and agriculture. But here's where it gets juicy. Pumapunku looks way older, and way more sophisticated than it has any right to be. Let's talk about those stones. Massive blocks of andesite and red sandstone, weighing as much as 130 tons. Some hauled from quarries over 50 miles away, dragged uphill at 12,800 feet above sea level. The logistics alone are bananas. But it's not just about the size. It's the precision that really fries your sleepy brain. You run your fingers along the edges of one stone, and they're so straight, so smooth, they feel manufactured. Like a factory cut them with diamond-tipped machines. The signature H-blocks here are especially bizarre. Shaped like perfect capital H's, complete with inner right angles and tiny grooves that look like they were designed to snap together. Some even suggest they formed part of a modular interlocking system, like megalithic IKEA furniture. No Allen wrench required. Mainstream historians offer a more grounded explanation. The Tiwanaku used bronze tools and abrasives with a lot of manpower. Possible? Sure. Likely? Especially when you factor in that the blocks are harder than the tools they supposedly used. You'd spend a lifetime carving just one, and even then, you'd probably mess up the first angle and throw the whole thing out the window. Historians still argue whether the visible structures at Pumapunku were built entirely by the Tiwanaku, or whether they inherited something older, greater, and long lost. Many believe what we see today might be the eroded remains of a civilization far older than 1,500 years. Possibly one that predates history as we know it. Now, cue the fringe theories, always ready to jump in like conspiracy cheerleaders. Some claim ancient aliens brought 3D laser cutters. Others propose the use of sonic levitation, anti-gravity, or secret knowledge from Atlantis. You roll your eyes a bit, but you're not entirely ruling anything out yet. Want a wild tidbit? Some say that the angular carvings at Pumapunku resemble computer circuits. Yeah. Microchip vibes in a place with no writing system, no metal fasteners, no recorded plans. Just a bunch of stones acting like they're on a NASA CAD grid. Oh, and the entire site is aligned to cardinal directions with spooky accuracy. The Tiwanaku people might have been stellar astronomers, or, as some theorize, they inherited blueprints from a culture that understood celestial mechanics better than some of us do today. Here's a mainstream historical anchor for you. Tiwanaku culture did leave behind intricate pottery, impressive agricultural systems like raised fields, and some artistic carvings. Clearly a capable civilization. But Pumapunku is like finding a smartphone in a village of rotary phones. It just doesn't match. You crouch by a toppled H-block and study its inner corners. The smoothness, the sharp edges, the drilled holes that seem decorative, functional, who knows? Archaeologists still haven't fully figured out what Pumapunku was. A temple? A fortress? A port? A lab for some kind of ancient tech? One fringe theory suggests it was a site of energy manipulation, earth energies perhaps, or something more quantum. Yes, it sounds like a rejected X-Men plot. But then you look at the strange magnetic anomalies detected around some stones and wonder, were these blocks chosen for more than just durability? Oh, and don't miss this gem. Oral traditions from the region say Pumapunku was built in a single night by gods using magic. While that might be metaphor, it could also be memory, distorted, mythologized memory of a lost technology. Or a sudden cataclysm. Speaking of cataclysms, some geologists believe the site might have been destroyed by an earthquake or a massive flood. The sheer way those blocks are scattered, some weighing as much as 3 elephants, suggests they didn't fall from clumsy hands. Something hit this place hard. You lean against one of the monoliths and close your eyes. The air here hums differently. Not metaphorically, it really does. The altitude, the silence, the weight of centuries pressing against your eardrums. It's like the stones are trying to whisper something, but they're speaking in code. Even the famous Gate of the Sun nearby adds to the enigma. Carved from a single block of stone, its calendar-like design and mysterious central figure with rays sprouting from its head has inspired more theories than a Reddit thread on ancient astronauts. But at the end of the day, here's what we do know. Puma Punku exists. It shouldn't be this precise. It shouldn't be this durable. And it definitely shouldn't be this forgotten. You almost get the sense that someone left it here on purpose. As a marker, a riddle, or maybe a warning. You take one last glance before the night pulls you onward. The stars above seem brighter now, as if winking in approval, or amusement, or just enjoying the show. You're still feeling the vibration of Puma Punku in your bones when the altitude drops. The air thickens, and suddenly you're sweating. Jungle heat clings to your skin like syrup. A million bugs hum in the darkness. And through the vine-choked canopy ahead, something sharp and jagged punches through the green. The pyramids of Mesoamerica. Ah yes, pyramids. Tall, triangular, dramatic. But not the Egyptian kind. No, these are different. Step pyramids. Multi-tiered. Covered in stairs that could break your ankle if you looked at them wrong. And while everyone talks about Giza, there's an unsettling question hanging over these stone giants in Central America. Why do so many ancient cultures, who supposedly never met, build pyramids? You wipe the sweat from your brow and climb the first level of El Castillo, the famous pyramid at Chichen Itza. You're in the heart of the ancient Mayan world now. The stairs are steep, narrow, and unforgiving. They weren't designed for tourists, they were made for rituals, processions, and maybe something stranger. El Castillo is one of those structures that makes you squint and ask, wait, how did they know that? The pyramid aligns perfectly with the sun during the equinoxes. At sunset, the light casts a shadow that forms the shape of a serpent slithering down the staircase. It's not an accident. It's a calendar, a cosmic show, and an architectural flex all rolled into one. And this is where things get juicy. Historians still argue whether Mesoamerican pyramid design evolved independently or was somehow influenced by contact with other ancient cultures. Because here's the thing, you'll find pyramids not just in Egypt and Central America, but in Mesopotamia, Sudan, Indonesia, India, China, even Italy. They're everywhere. One mainstream historical anchor: the Mayans were brilliant astronomers. Their calendar systems rival those of modern calculations. They could predict eclipses, solstices, and Venus's cycle with terrifying precision. Their pyramid temples weren't just built, they were programmed. Now here's a quirky tidbit. At certain pyramids like Chichen Itza, if you clap your hands at the base of the steps, the echo bounces back in a chirping sound. It mimics the call of the sacred Quetzal bird. Whether that's intentional or an acoustical accident is still debated, but it's weirdly specific, don't you think? Then there's Teotihuacan, further north in Mexico. A city so old the Aztecs found it in ruins and named it the place where the gods were created. The Pyramid of the Sun there is massive, second only to Egypt's Great Pyramid in footprint size. And it's aligned to something strange. Not true north, not the stars, but to a specific point 15.5 degrees east of north. Why? Scholars are still scratching their heads. As you pace along the Avenue of the Dead, lined with pyramids, you start to feel a pattern. Geometry, symmetry, numbers. Someone, long before the Aztecs, was obsessed with encoding knowledge into stone. But what kind of knowledge? Fringe theorists suggest that pyramid design was a global system of energy capture. That these structures were built atop ley lines, those theoretical energy veins crisscrossing Earth like a planetary nervous system. Others claim the pyramids were harmonically tuned to vibrate with Earth's frequency. Tesla-level stuff, but in stone sandals. Still others point to lost civilizations, possibly global, who passed their architectural wisdom across oceans we thought untraveled. Think of it. A seafaring culture, erased by time or cataclysm, leaving behind massive stone monuments as their calling card. The mainstream view? parallel evolution. Cultures often solve similar problems in similar ways. Tall structures impress people, serve as tombs or temples, and show off power. Fair. But that doesn't explain the repeating geometry, the celestial alignments, or the acoustics. You pause at the top of the temple of the inscriptions in Palenque, where King Pakal was entombed. Some say the carving on his sarcophagus lid shows him piloting a spaceship. The official line? The symbolism, a descent into the underworld. You tilt your head, stare at the stone, and decide. Maybe it's both. Symbolism and space-driving royalty. But why were the Mayans, Aztecs, and earlier cultures so obsessed with building upwards? Was it just to get closer to the gods? Or did they think height gave them power, energetic, astronomical, or otherwise? And what about the materials? Many Mesoamerican pyramids are made from limestone or volcanic stone. Some are built atop sacred cenotes, underground rivers and wells. That might have practical reasons, freshwater, but it also plays into their myths of portals to the underworld. Could these structures have been designed as gateways, not just between life and death, but between worlds? Here's another oddity. Pyramids in places like Cholula are now almost entirely buried, overgrown by earth, hidden under hills, forgotten by time. The Great Pyramid of Cholula is the largest pyramid in the world by volume, and yet most people don't even know it exists. You could be standing on it right now and not even notice. Some scholars propose that there were hundreds, maybe thousands of pyramid-like structures across the Americas that have yet to be uncovered. Jungle growth, erosion, and colonial destruction have hidden much more than they've revealed. And still, new pyramids are discovered every few years, tucked in satellite images or revealed by LiDAR scanning through the dense rainforest. Every time, the story shifts, the timeline stretches, and the mystery deepens. The sun begins to sink low over the jungle, casting long shadows across the mossy steppes beneath your feet. You watch birds drift across the orange sky, calling out like echoes of the past. From up here, the jungle seems endless, but you know it's littered with secrets. Stone ones, tall ones, ones that shouldn't be here. You climb down slowly, each step taking you closer to ground level and deeper into the unknown. The air is thick with ancient breath, and somewhere in the trees, you hear the ghost of a quetzal chirping back at your echo. Jungle vines slowly dissolve into sand, and your feet now crunch on something different, dry, powdery, ancient. The canopy opens up, replaced by a sky so blindingly blue it almost hurts. You shield your eyes just in time to catch a shimmer on the horizon. The Sahara is calling, but not the part you expect. Because beneath your feet lies not just endless dunes, but a colossal enigma worn almost flat by time and wind. The Sahara megaliths. Hold up, megaliths? In the desert? Oh yes, scattered across North Africa, particularly in Algeria, Libya, and Niger, are massive stone structures that predate the Egyptian pyramids by thousands of years. You blink through the glare and there they are. Standing stones, stone circles, burial chambers, and upright slabs half swallowed by the sand. The biggest concentration is at Tassili Eniger, a plateau that looks like Mars met a Salvador Dali painting. Here's your historical anchor. Tassili Eniger contains some of the world's oldest and most detailed prehistoric rock art, dating back to at least 6,000 BC, possibly older. These aren't your average stick figures either. You see dancers, hunters, cattle herders, and some very unusual beings. Let's dive into that fringe tidbit right off the bat. Some of the figures are so alien-like, they've earned names like the Martian or the astronaut. You squint at one tall, round-headed entity with huge eyes and something like a helmet. Is it just a ceremonial mask? Maybe, but it gives you the creeps in a way that tickles your sci-fi nerves. Mainstream scholars say these are ritualistic depictions, perhaps shamans in trance, wearing animal disguises. But historians still argue whether the art shows symbolic experiences or real events. And if the latter, just what exactly were these ancient Saharans witnessing? Here's what we know for sure. These people lived in what used to be a fertile savanna, long before the Sahara became the giant sandbox it is today. Yep, twist time, the Sahara wasn't always a desert. About 10,000 years ago, It was lush, green, and full of lakes, hippos, and trees. Climate shift? Giant joke from Mother Nature? Either way, people thrived here for thousands of years, building things they probably never expected would one day be buried in sand. You step carefully around one of the megalithic tombs at Tumulus of Tinhainen, believed to be the resting place of a queen who founded the Tuareg people. The construction is mind-blowing. Massive stones stacked precisely, chambers built with corbelled arches, and the whole thing oriented with stunning astronomical accuracy. How did they do this without cranes, blueprints, or Google Maps? And then there's Nabta Playa, perhaps the most famous of the Sahara megalithic sites, tucked near the Egyptian border. It's often called the African Stonehenge, but that nickname doesn't quite do it justice. You approach a dusty ring of standing stones, some rising from pits, others balanced just so. To the casual observer, it's just a pile of rocks. But get this, it's a functioning calendar circle aligned to solstices and the rising of Sirius, the dog star. That's right. These desert dwellers were watching the stars and marking time with monumental architecture 7,000 years ago. That's 2,000 years before Stonehenge and 1,000 years before the pyramids. Fringe theorists love this stuff. They argue that the people of Nabta Playa might have been the cultural ancestors of ancient Egypt, passing down astronomical and architectural knowledge like sacred family recipes. Some even propose that the origins of Egyptian science, myth, and megalithic mastery began right here, in a place most modern maps treat as empty. Mainstream scholars are cautiously interested. They admit there's a clear continuity in some symbols and practices. But whether the link is direct or just part of a broader North African development remains debated. Either way, it muddies the tidy timeline that says complex civilization began strictly in Mesopotamia or the Nile. Here's a theory that might raise your eyebrows. What if the Sahara wasn't just a lush savanna, but a hub of early civilization? A green corridor that allowed ideas, trade, and knowledge to travel across Africa before deserts walled everything off? Satellite images even suggest there are more structures, more circles, more ruins hidden under the sand, just waiting to be found. Like buried memories no one wants to dig up, except maybe you curious midnight archaeologist. Let's not forget the thousands of stone tumuli dotting the desert, many completely unexplored. Some are tombs, others seem to be symbolic markers. Their sheer volume hints at a population far larger and more organized than we've been led to believe. Some of these graves are aligned to celestial events, as if the dead were meant to watch the stars forever. And still, despite decades of study, no one can quite explain how these builders transported such massive stones, especially over uneven, sandy terrain. Some weigh more than 20 tons. You try dragging one 10 feet and tell me it's easy. One curious fringe theory: sound was used to move them, not with drums and dancing, but with frequency manipulation. Kind of like chanting a stone into levitation. Sounds bonkers, but then again, so does cutting perfect granite blocks with copper tools. Choose your weird. You crouch beside one ancient circle, run your hand along the warm, pitted surface of a standing stone. There's lichen crusted in the cracks, tiny desert insects darting in and out of shadow. The stone's silent, but heavy with presence. Like it knows things buried too deep for any shovel. As the wind picks up, grains of sand whisper across your skin. The desert hides and reveals by its own schedule, and you can't help but wonder what else lies beneath. In the distance, the stars are beginning to shimmer. You watch Sirius rise, just like it did for those long-gone skywatchers. No electricity, no telescopes, just awe. Maybe that's all it takes to build something that lasts. You're still blinking away sand when the sky above you shifts, just slightly. The stars rearrange themselves like someone nudged the ceiling of the universe. You rub your eyes, but they're not lying. Something up there is off. Not broken, just tuned to a different logic. Welcome to ancient astronomy. And not just sundials and seasonal guesses. We're talking planetary precision, star maps etched in stone, and civilizations that apparently knew way more about the night sky than they should have. Your journey begins where many astronomical mysteries do. Göbekli Tepe, that Neolithic riddle in southeastern Turkey we explored earlier. But this time, don't focus on the pillars. Look at the sky above them. Several researchers believe the T-shaped monoliths at Göbekli Tepe encode celestial knowledge, specifically star alignments. One controversial theory proposes that the Vulture Stone, Pillar 43, tracks a comet impact that could explain the Younger Dryas cooling event around 10,800 BC. That's pre-farming, pre-wheel, pre-everything. Yet here's this ancient monument possibly warning about a cosmic disaster like a prehistoric billboard. Mainstream archaeology scoffs at this idea, mostly because, let's be real, it sounds like ancient people left us a space rock forecast. But the carvings are undeniably symbolic, and historians still argue whether the builders were stargazers, mythmakers, or scientists in loincloths. Now shift westward in your imagination toward Stonehenge. The classic, the myth, the Instagram favorite. But here's the thing, it's not just a bunch of rocks where druids maybe threw parties. Stonehenge functions as a giant astronomical computer. Its stones are aligned to the summer and winter solstices so precisely that even today, modern engineers marvel at its accuracy. But what makes Stonehenge really strange isn't the alignment, it's the transportation problem. Some of those blue stones came from Wales. That's over 140 miles away, through forest, swamp, and hill. And they were moved before the wheel. Let that sink in while you imagine trying to push a bathtub across a bog. Quirky fringe theory incoming. Some suggest Stonehenge wasn't just a calendar or burial site, but a kind of resonant frequency device. A sonic temple. The idea is that the stones, when struck or chanted around, produce vibrations that can induce trance or healing states. You may roll your eyes, but many ancient sites have acoustics so specific they seem intentional. Let's head east now, to the ruins of Angkor Wat in Cambodia, a sprawling temple complex originally dedicated to Vishnu. You're walking the perimeter when it hits you. The entire complex mirrors the Draco constellation. Not vaguely, not poetically, mathematically. Some scholars say the layout models the Hindu concept of the cosmos, Mount Meru in the center, celestial bodies radiating outward. Here's your mainstream anchor. Angkor Wat was built in the 12th century with such astronomical precision that even today, during equinox sunrise, the sun rises directly over its central tower as seen from the main entrance. This was no happy accident. But here's where it gets weird. When you compare Angkor Wat's ground layout to the positions of stars in the Draco constellation around 10,500 BC, they line up. That's 9,000 years before the temple was built. Why design it that way? Was it referencing an ancient memory, or echoing a design pattern older than anyone realized? Historians still argue whether the alignment was symbolic, mythological, or inherited from some lost tradition. There's no direct evidence of time machines yet, but you start to wonder. And then there's the Dogon people of Mali, modern, living folks with ancient roots. They've passed down stories for generations that include knowledge of Sirius B, a companion star to Sirius A. Here's the kicker. Sirius B is invisible to the naked eye, discovered by Western science only in the 1800s with telescopes. But the Dogon? They say their ancestors knew about it all along. They describe its orbit, density, and even its white dwarf status with eerie accuracy. Where'd they get that info? Oral tradition doesn't usually include astrophysics. Some say early contact with astronomers, French anthropologists, maybe explains it. Others suggest something more outlandish, that this knowledge was gifted by beings from Sirius itself. Yep, space visitors. And before you laugh, remember, oral history can carry surprising accuracy over millennia. Just ask Polynesian navigators. Let's zoom over to Nazca, Peru, home of the infamous Nazca lines. Giant geoglyphs etched into the desert floor. Monkeys, hummingbirds, spirals, and strange geometric shapes. Best seen from the air. Ancient alien crowd loves this one. Why make art you can't see unless you're flying? But one plausible theory is that these lines may map constellations or astronomical cycles. Some align with solstice sunrises. Others, like the straight lines and rays, may have marked seasonal water sources based on solar shadows. Kind of like a huge, dusty, celestial spreadsheet. Quirky tidbit: one of the lesser-known geoglyphs looks very much like a spaceman waving. Coincidence? You be the judge. Back up in Europe, there's Newgrange in Ireland. Older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids. It's a tomb, but during the winter solstice, sunlight floods the central chamber in a single golden beam that perfectly illuminates the back wall carvings. One morning a year, for less than 20 minutes. And then, darkness for 364 more days. You imagine the first builders watching the sun crest over a frostbitten horizon, praying it would rise again. That beam of light? It wasn't just practical, it was hope carved in stone. Back to Egypt for one last thought. The Great Pyramid at Giza is aligned to true north with astonishing accuracy. Like, better than your iPhone's compass accuracy. Its layout also seems to correlate with the stars of Orion's belt. Were the pyramids meant to mirror the sky, to anchor Earth to heaven? You sit beneath 1,000,000 stars, every one of them burning with stories too old for language. And somewhere deep in the hum of the cosmos, you feel it. Ancient people were watching the sky very closely, not just for crops or weather, but for meaning, for patterns, maybe even for warnings. Why did so many of them build to match the stars? Why align tombs, temples, and towers with things light years away? Was it to mark time, honor gods? Or was it something deeper? A message? A map? Or maybe a mirror? The stars slowly fade as dawn creeps over the horizon. But you're not done wandering. Not by a long shot. The wind tugs at your sleeve like a kid with a secret, and before you know it, you're standing at the edge of something vast. Something carved into the earth with stubborn precision. You've reached the doorstep of Petra, the ancient rose-red city of Jordan, half-built and half-carved straight into glowing cliffs. But what most tourists miss, between camel selfies and crumbling columns, is that Petra holds mysteries far deeper than its pretty facade. So you dust the sand from your shoes and step into the lost city. Petra was once the thriving capital of the Nabatean kingdom around the 4th century BC. The Nabateans were master traders, architects, and engineers, and yet, somehow, almost no one knows where they came from. Their language, partially deciphered. Their origins, still debated. Their cultural influences, a chaotic blend of Greco-Roman, Mesopotamian, and local Arabian traditions. It's like their whole civilization just strolled into history already wearing designer brands from a dozen different places. You pass under the towering columns of the Sikh, a narrow canyon that funnels you toward Petra's most famous structure, the Treasury, or Al-Khazna. It glows pink in the early light, an architectural jaw-dropper carved into a 250-foot cliff. But despite the name, it wasn't a treasury. It was likely a royal tomb, or maybe a temple, or, well, historians still argue over its true purpose. And that's the theme of Petra, gorgeous riddles with no clear answers. For example, why did the Nabateans build into the cliffs instead of on top of them? Why are some of their tombs oriented precisely with the solstices? Why do certain chambers echo with specific resonant frequencies, like they were built for sound rituals? And here's your quirky detour. According to local legend, the treasury was built by a sorcerer using magic to hide treasure from Alexander the Great. Bullet holes still scar the facade, left by looters who believed the urn at the top was filled with gold. Spoiler, it wasn't. Just a very dusty, very disappointed urn. Back in reality, Petra reveals itself as an ancient engineering marvel. The Nabateans built an underground water system that sustained over 30,000 people in the middle of a desert. That's not just impressive, it's borderline miraculous. They carved out dams, channels, cisterns, and even pressure systems to keep water flowing. Engineers today still puzzle over how they maintained it with no pumps or electricity. Desert hydrology? The Nabateans practically wrote the book. And yet, Petra eventually fell. Earthquakes and shifting trade routes crushed its prosperity. By the 7th century AD, it was abandoned, swallowed by sand and forgotten until a Swiss explorer rediscovered it in 1812. By the way, that explorer disguised himself as a Muslim holy man to sneak in. Commitment to the bit, October 10th. Here's a theory you'll love. Some researchers believe Petra was part of a global pattern, a network of sacred sites aligned with each other across continents. Ley lines. Anyone? A few fringe maps try to connect Petra with the Great Pyramid, Machu Picchu, and Angkor Wat in one continuous energy grid. It's not exactly peer-reviewed, but it does make you look at your globe a little differently. Zooming in, one detail at Petra stands out. The monastery, or Ad Dare, sits high above the city, nearly 900 steps carved into the cliffside. You climb slowly, each footfall echoing like a heartbeat. When you finally reach the top, gasping a little, okay, a lot, you realize this place wasn't just for show. It was for ritual. The front is massive, larger than the treasury, and yet the inside is bare, echoing, and eerily still. Its alignment with the winter solstice sunset means once a year, the inner chamber is bathed in golden light. Sounds familiar? Yep, like Newgrange, like Karnak, like all those other ancient places wired to the heavens. So what were the Nabateans watching for? Some scholars think it was all about agriculture, tracking seasons in an unforgiving desert. Others say it was spiritual, a way to commune with gods through light and stone. But deep down, you feel it's something older, a conversation that predates religion or farming, something instinctual. And then, as you descend, you catch sight of one of Petra's anomalous tombs. It's different. The carving style is off. The proportions are strange, almost geometric to the point of being non-human. Some believe these outliers weren't made by Nabateans at all, but repurposed from earlier, unknown builders. That's right. Petra may not be the original story. It might be a remix. Archaeologists have found tools, burial styles, and foundations older than the Nabateans themselves. Some argue Petra sits atop an even more ancient settlement, possibly dating back to the Bronze Age or earlier. But the deeper you dig, the more things start to blur. Did the Nabateans inherit something? Were they the last torchbearers of a forgotten tradition? Or did they stumble on an ancient site just like we did and think, let's carve some columns and see what happens? You lean against a weather-worn column and take it all in. The canyons, the tombs, the sky slowly lighting up behind the cliffs. It's almost too poetic. Like Petra knew you'd come back someday. Like it never wanted to be lost. It just wanted to be remembered. The Nabateans may have vanished, but their questions haven't. And now they're yours. You wipe the dust from your hands as the canyon narrows behind you. The rose-red cliffs of Petra fade into the distance, and now you stand at the edge of a desert that doesn't end. One of those places where even the wind feels like it's carrying rumors. Ahead lies one of Earth's most enduring riddles, sculpted into the silence of stone. No road signs, no crowds, just the Great Sphinx of Giza, looking like it woke up a few thousand years too early and has been glaring about it ever since. The sun peaks over the horizon, lighting up that familiar lion's body and human face. At 240 feet long and 66 feet high, it's still the largest monolith statue on Earth. You've probably seen 100 photos of it, but none of them prepare you for the size or the sheer weirdness of the thing when you're standing beneath it. Let's start with what we know. Mainstream Egyptologists say the Sphinx was built around 2500 BC for Pharaoh Khafre, the same guy responsible for the Second Great Pyramid. But here's your first speed bump. There are no inscriptions on the Sphinx itself identifying Khafre. Not a single cartouche. Nothing saying, I made this, or Khafre was here, or Sphinx selfie 2500 BC. That's odd. Ancient Egyptian rulers loved plastering their names on everything: walls, temples, lunchboxes. So why not this? And here comes the first real crack in the story: the erosion patterns. Some geologists, especially John Anthony West and Robert Schoch, noticed that the Sphinx doesn't show the sharp, wind-blown damage typical of desert weathering. Instead, it shows rounded grooves, as if it had been subjected to heavy rainfall over centuries. Now here's your historical jaw drop. The last time Egypt saw that kind of sustained rainfall was around 700 to 5000 BC. Some bold theorists even stretch that timeline to 10,000 BC, way before the pharaohs, pyramids, or written history. Historians still argue whether that erosion is due to rain, wind, or ancient power washing. But if it really was rainfall, then the Sphinx is older than agriculture in the Nile Valley. Let that sit for a second. So, if the Sphinx wasn't built by Khafre, who carved it? And more importantly, why? One fringe theory suggests the Sphinx was originally a lion, a tribute to the constellation Leo, and was later recarved into a pharaoh's face. That would explain why the head seems disproportionately small for the body, almost like it doesn't quite fit. It's the stone equivalent of someone photoshopping a profile pic onto a dinosaur. Then there's the curious placement. The Sphinx faces due east, directly aligned with the rising sun on the spring equinox. That's no accident. Ancient Egyptians were masters of cosmic alignment, but if you rewind the skies with software, you'll find that around 10,500 BC, the Sphinx would have lined up almost perfectly with Leo in the night sky. Coincidence? Maybe, or maybe not. Meanwhile, Egyptian records barely mention the Sphinx for centuries after it was supposedly built. It pops up in a dream stele placed between its paws by Pharaoh Thutmose IV around 1400 BC. He claimed the Sphinx spoke to him in a dream, promising kingship if he cleared away the sand. That's one way to get promoted. But what's under the Sphinx? That's where things go full mystery novel. Several researchers, including a few in the early 20th century and later fringe theorists like Edgar Cayce, claim there are chambers and tunnels beneath the Sphinx. Cayce, a psychic known for his strange predictions, even insisted there was a hall of records hidden underneath, containing knowledge from the lost civilization of Atlantis. Mainstream archaeologists have dismissed this as nonsense. And yet, seismic surveys done in the 1990s did find anomalies under the Sphinx's paws, rectangular shapes suggesting hollow spaces. Egypt's official stance? Natural fissures. But the access to dig and explore further? Limited, often denied. Makes you wonder what might be hiding under all that limestone. Let's add one more twist for fun. The so-called inventory stele found near the Sphinx claims it was already ancient when Khafre's father, Khufu, was around. That's the same Khufu who built the Great Pyramid. If true, it places the Sphinx before the pyramids. So here you are, standing in front of a giant stone enigma that might be twice as old as we thought. One that may have been watching the stars before humans even figured out how to farm. One that has no name carved into it, no blueprints, no instructions. What was its purpose? Some believe it was a guardian, marking the beginning of a sacred cycle. Others think it's the remnant of a much older, forgotten culture, one that left behind just enough to confuse the daylights out of us. And then there are those who say it's all nonsense, that the erosion theories are flawed and the Sphinx really is just an old royal selfie. But here's what no one can deny. It shouldn't still be here. It has no right being this intact after thousands of years of wind, sand, and tourists climbing on its tail. Yet there it sits, patient, silent, watching, and that's the part that gets you. It's not what the Sphinx says, it's what it doesn't. The way it just waits. You feel the breeze shift again, and for a second, it's like the Sphinx is whispering, not in words but in stone and silence. You were never meant to solve this. You were meant to remember. The whisper of the Sphinx fades behind you, but it leaves a strange echo in your thoughts. One that follows you across oceans. Your feet touch down on jungle-covered hills, humid air clinging to your skin like warm silk. You're not in the desert anymore. You're in Mesoamerica, where mystery is chiseled into volcanic stone and swallowed by vines. Welcome to Teotihuacan, the ancient city that shouldn't exist and yet does. The name is Nahuatl, given centuries after the city was abandoned. It means the place where gods were born. That's a bold nickname for a ghost town. But once you step onto the Avenue of the Dead, you get it. The wide stone causeway stretches for miles, flanked by pyramids so perfectly placed they feel less built than summoned. No one knows who built Teotihuacan. Let that settle in for a second. It wasn't the Aztecs. They arrived much later and found it already in ruins. The Maya didn't build it either, though they referenced it with reverence in their glyphs. Archaeologists guess the city rose around 100 BCE and peaked around 450 CE, hosting perhaps 150,000 people. But the builders? Still unidentified. Like showing up to a dinner party and finding the food still warm but no host in sight. Your feet crunch on stone as you head toward the Pyramid of the Sun, third largest pyramid in the world. It's aligned to the setting sun on the summer solstice, because of course it is. But here's the strange part. It's not aligned with the cardinal directions like most Mesoamerican sites. It's offset by 15.5 degrees. Why? One theory says it's aligned to Cerro Gordo, the the sacred mountain to the north. Others say it points toward the setting of the Pleiades. A more fringe take. The angle is part of an ancient global grid, a lost system of sacred geometry spanning continents. Lines and angles that hum with frequency. Yes, we're back to energy fields again. But here's a hard fact. The city layout encodes mathematical constants, including the golden ratio, the spacing between structures, the dimensions of the pyramids. None of it is random. It's like someone planned it using a calculator they weren't supposed to have. The Pyramid of the Sun was built over a massive cave, an entrance to the underworld in ancient cosmology. When researchers mapped the cave using radar, they found a system of chambers, and in 2018, they uncovered traces of mercury, liquid mercury, beneath another pyramid. Why? That's anyone's guess. Mercury wasn't just rare, it was dangerous. Theories range from ceremonial symbolism to, well, something more alchemical. Quirky tidbit? In 2015, a robot exploring beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent found tiny metallic spheres in a sealed tunnel, along with mica, pyrite, and more mercury. The spheres baffled scientists. They aren't storage containers. They aren't offerings. Some believe they're symbolic stars in an underworld sky. Others wonder if there's some kind of ancient tech. Ball bearings for gods, maybe. Historians still argue whether Teotihuacan was a peaceful trade hub or a militaristic state. There's evidence of both. A multicultural population, wide-open plazas, and then suddenly mass graves and burned temples. Around 550 CE, something or someone triggered a fiery collapse. No one knows what set it off. Civil war? Environmental collapse? Invasion? Alien Yelp review gone wrong? And then there's the Pyramid of the Moon, perfectly framed by the mountain behind it. Every step of this pyramid is proportioned using a base unit that some believe was shared with sites like Giza and Angkor. Coincidence? Or a whisper of a global blueprint? Let's talk about that mysterious tunnel again beneath the Feathered Serpent Temple. Excavations have revealed elaborate chambers, artifacts, and more mercury than you'd want near your face. Some say the tunnel was meant to symbolize the journey to the underworld. Others think it was more than symbolic, a place where something happened. A ritual, a transformation, a containment? No one's sure, but one thing is obvious. Teotihuacan was built with intention. Not just religious, but cosmic, technological, philosophical, maybe even defensive. You walk the length of the Avenue of the Dead, and it feels less like a city and more like a machine designed to do something, track stars perhaps, or focus energy, or map the heavens onto Earth. You can't shake the feeling that Teotihuacan wasn't made for people, not entirely. It was made for something greater, something watching. The Aztecs believed the gods gathered here to create the fifth sun, the current era of our world. In their mythology, the previous four suns ended in destruction. Jaguars, hurricanes, fire, and floods. If Teotihuacan really was where gods were born, maybe it wasn't just about worship. Maybe it was a reset station. And now it's eerily silent. No music, no rituals, no bustling markets. Just wind whispering down empty plazas, brushing past the ruins like it's trying to remember a song it once knew. You stand in the shadow of the Pyramid of the Sun, the ground humming beneath your feet, and feel it. Not fear, not awe, just a sense of unfinished business. Like the city is waiting for someone to turn it back on. Or maybe to ask the right question. You leave the sun-soaked ruins of Teotihuacan behind, and for a moment you're not quite sure which century you're in. Dust still clings to your clothes, and your mind is thick with blueprints and myths. But the world keeps pulling you forward, this time into the Amazon. You wouldn't think a rainforest could hide cities the size of ancient Rome, but that's exactly what recent discoveries are starting to suggest. Beneath the buzzing canopy, swallowed by vines and centuries of silence, lie ruins that may completely rewrite what we thought we knew about pre-Columbian civilizations. Tonight, you're wandering through the shadows of the Amazon's lost cities. Places so overgrown, they were mistaken for legends. For a long time, scholars believed the Amazon was too wild, too nutrient-poor to support large civilizations. Early explorers like Francisco de Orellana in the 1540s described dense, advanced settlements lining the riverbanks, but later expeditions found nothing. So, they dismissed his tales as exaggerations, jungle fever, basically. But here's the plot twist. He may have been telling the truth all along. In the 21st century, satellite imagery and LiDAR scanning began peeling back the jungle's leafy disguise. Underneath the forest in Brazil and Bolivia, archaeologists have discovered vast networks of geometric earthworks, roads, canals, causeways, and even pyramidal mounds. Not just one city, not just two, dozens, maybe more, and they're connected by a mind-bending infrastructure. Some arranged in grids, others linked by straight roads that cut through miles of thick terrain, ignoring rivers and elevation changes like it's no big deal. One set of earthworks, known as the geoglyphs of Acre, forms circles, squares, and even spirals hundreds of meters wide. Clearly human-made, clearly intentional. But what for? Historians still argue whether these structures were ceremonial centers, defensive outposts, or astronomical calendars. But the scale is impossible to ignore. This wasn't tribal wandering, it was urban planning, with zoning laws, drainage, and everything. And then there's terra preta, literally black earth. It's a type of man-made supersoil, rich in charcoal, bone, compost, and organic waste. It's incredibly fertile centuries later. Modern farmers still seek it out. And it turns out, vast areas of the Amazon are laced with terra preta, suggesting massive agricultural projects that could support large populations. In other words, ancient Amazonians weren't just surviving in the jungle, they were terraforming it. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some scientists believe terra preta could be the key to future climate solutions. It locks in carbon and regenerates degraded soil. Basically, ancient ecoscience that's still ahead of us. But who made it? And how? No one culture is credited. Some of the earthworks date back over 2,000 years, others closer to 1,000. They span multiple regions and languages, none of which left written records. And then, around the time Europeans arrived, they vanish. A few theories suggest disease spread faster than the conquistadors themselves, wiping out up to 90% of the population before any real contact even happened. So when later explorers found empty forests, they didn't realize they were walking through the bones of cities. It's unsettling, like finding out the ruins have been watching all along, just very politely covered in moss. One of the most stunning finds? A city known as Z, supposedly deep in the jungle and first hunted by British explorer Percy Fawcett. He vanished in 1925 trying to find it, and his story became the inspiration for countless adventure tales, Indiana Jones included. Most people dismissed Z as a myth, the fever dream of a man who inhaled too many jungle spores. But in 2022, archaeologists revealed LiDAR scans in Bolivia's Llanos de Moxos region that show a network of interconnected cities, some with pyramid platforms and ceremonial plazas. Sound familiar? It might not be the Z Fawcett was chasing, but it's proof that advanced Amazonian civilizations were real and not just a colonial fantasy. Now imagine this. What if we've only found a fraction? The jungle still covers millions of square kilometers, and the deeper you go, the stranger things get. Whispered stories of forest guardians, carvings of creatures that don't quite match the known animal kingdom, even reports of stone roads disappearing into mountains, overgrown and forgotten. You feel the forest press close around you, not in a threatening way, just attentive, like it's watching to see what you'll do with this knowledge, whether you'll remember or just scroll on by. Because here's the wild part, these weren't just hidden cities. They were civilizations that knew how to live with the earth, not just on it. They didn't strip the land bare, they engineered balance. It's a kind of genius we're only beginning to understand. And maybe that's the scariest mystery of all. What if they were more advanced than us, just in a different direction? You push aside a curtain of vines and see a mound rising from the undergrowth, half swallowed by tree roots, too symmetrical to be natural. A staircase, maybe. Temple. A memory. The silent here. Not the kind of silence you hear, but the kind you feel in your bones. And you wonder, if the trees could talk, what stories would they tell? The air grows cooler now, but only because you've climbed so high that the clouds graze your shoulders. The Amazon's green maze falls away behind you, replaced by sheer cliffs and stone terraces, carved into a mountain like steps for giants. You've reached the roof of the Andes. Welcome to Machu Picchu, the lost city of the Inca, or, depending on who you ask, something even older. You step cautiously along the narrow ridge that leads to the city, perched precariously between Huayna Picchu and Machu Picchu peaks, as if the earth is pinching a secret between two fingers. Mist coils around you like a living thing. Below, the Urubamba River snakes silently past cliffs so steep, they barely seem real. It's the kind of view that makes your knees forget how to function. Mainstream archaeology says Machu Picchu was built in the 15th century by the Inca Emperor Pachacuti, a sort of king-meets contractor who wanted a royal estate in the clouds. And sure, that's the official line. But you start walking through these empty stone corridors, and things don't quite add up. First, let's talk about the stonework. The buildings here are made of ashlar masonry. Massive stones carved so precisely that not even a piece of paper can fit between them. No mortar, just perfectly cut granite blocks, many weighing several tons, stacked and slotted like a celestial puzzle. And somehow, despite earthquakes, rain, and time, the walls haven't budged. Historians still argue whether the Inca developed this method themselves or inherited it from a lost predecessor. Some of the rougher buildings on site are clearly Inca. Their stonework is impressive, but not mind-blowing. But the finer, megalithic structures, they're another level entirely. It's like Picasso painting over a Leonardo. Same canvas, different hand. That raises the question. Was Machu Picchu built by the Inca, or on top of something older? And here's the kicker. There's no written record of Machu Picchu in Spanish chronicles. The conquistadors never found it. It wasn't even discovered by modern history until 1911, when Hiram Bingham stumbled upon it with the help of a local farmer. It had been abandoned and reclaimed by jungle for centuries. Hidden, preserved. Some theorists argue that was intentional, that Machu Picchu was a kind of sanctuary or vault, meant to protect sacred knowledge from outsiders, maybe even from time itself. And then there's Intihuatana, the hitching post of the sun, a mysterious carved stone at the site's highest point. It lines up with the sun during equinoxes and may have served as an astronomical device, a ritual site, or something else entirely. Some believe it was used to tie the sun to the earth during ceremonies, ensuring it wouldn't stray too far during the changing seasons. Fringe theorists push it further. They suggest it was a kind of energy antenna harnessing geomagnetic currents. Think of it as the Incan Wi-Fi router, if you like. Of course, mainstream scholars roll their eyes at that, but let's be real. No one's totally sure what it did. You sit on a sun-warmed rock and look across the terraces, hundreds of them, carved so precisely that they remain intact even now. Not only were they used for farming in a brutal climate, they were engineered with drainage systems, layered soils, and retaining walls that kept the whole mountain from collapsing under the weight of its own ambition. And here's your quirky tidbit. The Inca didn't use the wheel for construction. Not because they didn't know it existed, they had small wheeled toys, but because the terrain was too steep and rocky. Instead, they used manpower, ropes, and pure stubbornness. You wander into the Temple of the Three Windows, then down into the main plaza. The symmetry is astounding. Every building is placed with cosmic intent, aligned to solstices, mountains, and sacred constellations. This wasn't just architecture. It was a cosmic diagram. There's even a cave beneath the site, carved out with smooth, impossible precision. Some say it leads deeper into the mountain. Others claim it was the final resting place for the royal dead, or something far older. It gets weirder. Machu Picchu is part of a larger network, connected by stone paths called the Capac Nan, stretching over 20,000 miles across mountains, rivers, and deserts. Think of it like the Incan version of the internet. Nodes, routes, messengers, and encrypted access. You couldn't just stroll into royal roads without permission. And right at the heart of that web, places like Machu Picchu. But here's the detail that haunts you. The placement of Machu Picchu on that narrow ridge isn't just dramatic, it's strategic. Geologists have noted that the site sits on intersecting tectonic faults, which may have made it easier to quarry the massive stones. Or may suggest the Incas understood Earth energy in ways we still can't fully explain. Fringe theories? Oh, they go wild here. Some claim the Incas, or whoever came before them, were tapping into telluric currents, energy flows in the Earth. Others believe Machu Picchu marks a kind of planetary power node, part of a global grid used by ancient civilizations for, well, that part varies. Everything from consciousness expansion to teleportation. Too far-fetched? Maybe. But as the clouds swirl around the mountain and you stare into the carved stone face of Intihuatana, it's hard to shake the feeling that Machu Picchu wasn't just a city. It was a signal, maybe a message, maybe a lighthouse, or maybe a reminder of how much we've forgotten. You descend the Andes with that ghostly echo of Machu Picchu still clinging to your shoulders, like the mountain itself is reluctant to let you go. Your path winds east now, past deserts and jungles, across time zones and tectonic plates, until you find yourself in a place where the Earth has been drawn upon like a cosmic notebook. You're standing in the Nazca Desert in southern Peru. The sun is relentless. The wind is dry and sharp. The landscape looks barren. Nothing but rocks, rust-colored sand, and low hills. And yet, from above, it's a masterpiece. The Nazca lines, massive geoglyphs etched into the desert floor, so large and precise that many of them couldn't even be identified until humans invented airplanes. There are animals, spiders, monkeys, hummingbirds, whales. There are geometric shapes, spirals, trapezoids, zigzags stretching for miles. There's even what looks suspiciously like a humanoid figure waving, possibly wearing a helmet. Just saying. Historians date the lines back to between 500 BCE and 500 CE, created by the Nazca culture. They made them by removing the reddish pebbles on the desert surface, revealing the lighter-colored earth beneath. The dry, windless climate has preserved them like a vacuum-sealed mural. So, okay, we know how they were made, but as always, it's the why that melts your brain. The mainstream theory is that the lines were part of ritual practices, likely involving water. In the middle of a harsh desert, rainfall meant life, and many of the shapes are believed to point towards subterranean aquifers or ceremonial gathering spots. Some archaeologists argue the lines were walked along during rituals, like sacred labyrinths. Historians still argue whether the glyphs served practical, spiritual, or astronomical purposes. Because here's the wild part. Many of the lines align with solstices, equinoxes, and planetary movements. One line points directly at the sunrise on the winter solstice. Others track the moon's rise and fall. So, were they giant calendars? Or were they messages? To the gods? To the sky? To someone or something looking down? You wouldn't be the first to wonder. Eric von Daniken made the Nazca lines famous with his ancient astronaut theories. He argued they were runways for spacecraft, pointing out that some of the wide, flat trapezoids resemble modern airstrips. Fringe, yes, but undeniably fun to imagine. Especially when you're standing on the ground and can't see the full shape, but a being in the air easily could. Quirky tidbit? The monkey figure has 9 fingers. Whether that's symbolic or a shout-out to some non-human entity, well, that's up to you. Now, skeptics will tell you the Nazca people could have designed the lines using simple tools and a bit of rope. And they're right, it is possible to scale drawings using grid systems and walkable guides. But that doesn't explain why thousands of lines and figures, many of them precise to the meter, were spread over 200 square miles of brutally harsh terrain. And it definitely doesn't explain Palpa. Just north of Nazca, the Palpa lines reveal even older geoglyphs, some believed to date back to 1000 BCE. Here things get extra weird. There are human-like figures with enormous heads and outstretched arms. There's even what looks like a family portrait, etched into the mountain. These are on hillsides, visible from below, unlike the Nazca lines, which are best seen from the sky. So, now we have 2 different styles of line art, possibly from 2 different cultures, both covering massive areas with no clear explanation. You step across the dry soil, careful not to disturb anything. The desert feels oddly silent, like it's listening, not just existing. It's the kind of silence that carries the weight of forgotten languages and unanswered prayers. The mystery deepens with the Puquios, ancient spiral-shaped aqueducts in the Nazca region. They're still functioning today. That's right, 2,000-year-old water systems, designed to tap underground water and ventilate the flow using corkscrew-shaped intakes. Think ancient engineering meets hydrodynamic genius. And guess what? Some of the Nazca lines point directly to these pukios. Coincidence? Probably not. But what if the lines weren't just practical markers, but encoded knowledge? What if they were visual maps, telling future generations where to find water, when to plant crops, or how to survive in this unforgiving desert? Or, in a more fringe theory, what if they were frequency diagrams, messages not written in language but in vibration? There are researchers who think the Nazca lines resonate at particular frequencies when viewed from above, like crop circles designed for sonar. Too weird? Maybe. But weirder still is that we keep finding new geoglyphs. In 2020, artificial intelligence scanning satellite imagery revealed 143 previously undiscovered figures, hidden in the desert. Some are animals never seen before in Nazca art. Others are harder to identify. You sit down, cross-legged on a sun-baked rock, and try to imagine what it was like to stand here 2,000 years ago. What were they thinking as they carved these lines, foot by foot, over weeks or months? Did they know future eyes would only truly see their work from above? Or were they just trying to speak to the stars? One last thought as you rise. Many of these geoglyphs are disappearing. The wind and time are erasing them inch by inch. Some have already been lost forever. The desert is reclaiming its parchment. So maybe the real mystery isn't why the lines were made, but what happens when they're gone. What stories vanish with them? What warnings? What truths we were never supposed to forget? You leave the parched Nazca Plateau behind, still blinking away the ghost shapes of monkeys and spirals burned into your retinas. The desert gives way to coastline now. Rocky cliffs where salt hangs in the air and the ocean crashes below like an angry drum. But you're not here for waves or sea breezes. You're here for something buried. Not in sand, in stone. Welcome to the Sacsayhuaman Fortress, or what's left of it. You hike through Cusco's highland hills to reach it. Your breath shortens in the thin air, and your legs protest every incline. But then, like a broken puzzle reassembled by giants, it appears on the ridgeline. A wall of massive, interlocking stones, each weighing tens, even hundreds of tons, zigzagging across the landscape in a pattern both brutal and elegant. This place is more than ruins. It's geometric defiance. It doesn't want to be explained. Mainstream history attributes Sacsayhuaman to the Inca, built in the 15th century as a military fortress to defend Cusco. But again, there's a catch. The largest and most precisely cut stones seem too advanced, even compared to other Incan structures. And, as with Machu Picchu, there's evidence that parts of it might be much older. Historians still argue whether the Inca inherited this megalithic base from a vanished civilization. The lower levels, those perfect, seamless walls, use stonework the Inca never replicated elsewhere. No mortar, no visible chisel marks, just blocks cut and slotted so perfectly, they still stand after centuries of earthquakes. And Peru is earthquake country. The site was severely damaged by the Spanish after conquest. Much of its upper structures were dismantled for building materials. But the lower megaliths, they couldn't move them. Even with modern cranes, it would be a logistical nightmare to replicate what's here. Let's pause on that. You're standing in front of a single stone. Just one, that weighs over 300 tons. That's more than 500 grand pianos stacked together. And it wasn't just moved. It was carved to fit with its neighbors in complex curves, angles, and grooves. Some joints have as many as 12 contact points, locking together like ancient Legos made of pure granite. There's no sign of how they were transported from the quarries, some of which were over 10 miles away, across rough terrain and hills. The Inca didn't use wheels or draft animals. Ropes and manpower are the usual explanation, but good luck finding 500 people who can push a mountain up another mountain. Here's your quirky fact. Local legends say the stones were sung into place, not lifted, not dragged, sung, with sounds or chants that softened the rock or made it float. Most archaeologists brush that off, of course, but some fringe researchers point to acoustic levitation experiments, sound waves used to move small objects, as a possible inspiration. Too sci-fi? Sure. But when you're staring up at a 30-foot-high wall with perfectly beveled edges, you start to wonder whether gravity has been lying to us all along. And the layout of the site? It's no accident. The entire complex is shaped like the head of a puma, an animal sacred to the Inca, with Cusco itself forming the body in a larger cosmic city plan. The zigzag walls are thought to represent the puma's teeth, which is pretty metal when you think about it. But here's where it gets extra weird. Some believe Sacsayhuaman wasn't just a fortress. They say it was a temple, a celestial observatory, or even part of an ancient energy grid. The massive stones may have channeled earth currents or amplified certain resonances. And yes, there are reports of people who say they felt vibrations, hallucinations, or altered states of consciousness just standing between certain stones. You wander deeper in, toward the three terraces stacked like a fortress of thunder. From the air, they form a kind of jagged lightning bolt across the hill. But there's no straight line here. Every stone is curved, adjusted, shaped by some ancient eye that saw things in ways we don't anymore. And beneath your feet, caves, tunnels, some sealed, others rumored to stretch all the way to Coricancha, the Incan temple of the sun in Cusco's heart. Explorers have tried to map these tunnels. Some have disappeared doing it. No joke. One tunnel reportedly contained golden artifacts, which were whisked away during the conquest, or hidden so well that no one's found them since. Some locals believe the treasure is still there, buried inside a secret chamber, guarded by stone and silence. And we can't forget the Intihuatana, or hitching posts of the sun, found across the Andes. Many believe Sacsayhuaman had one now lost. These sacred stones were thought to connect heaven and earth, time and space. Like cosmic tuning forks, what's left today is haunting enough. You rest against a warm stone and close your eyes. The wind slides over you like a slow tide, and you swear you can almost hear the chanting. Faint, beneath the earth. There's something about this place. Not just its age or its precision, but the intent behind it. Whoever built Sacsayhuaman didn't just want a wall. They wanted a message set in stone. Something that would last beyond language, beyond war, beyond memory. And here you are, listening. Your breath fogs in the mountain air as you step away from the looming stones of Sacsayhuaman. Still half convinced you heard them whisper. The path turns north now, and your shadow grows long as you cross borders, timelines, and a few logical boundaries, until you arrive at one of the most bewildering sights of all. You're standing in front of Tiwanaku, or what's left of it, just off the southern shore of Lake Titicaca, in modern-day Bolivia. This ancient site rests like a riddle halfway told. Cracked columns, fallen monoliths, and wide platforms lie scattered across a grassy plain. The Andes rise in the distance, like tired sentinels who've seen too much and won't speak of it. Tiwanaku, or Tiahuanaco, depending on the spelling, was once the center of a mighty pre-Incan civilization. Official archaeology dates its peak between 500 and 1000 CE. But here's where the dirt gets weird. Parts of the site appear much older. Much older. Some researchers suggest origins going back to 15,000 BCE, which, if true, flips history on its head, kicks sand in its face, and walks off laughing. You walk across a wide stone plaza, your feet tracing the outline of something far bigger than you expected. Tiwanaku wasn't just a city. It was a cosmic complex, carefully aligned to celestial events and mathematical principles. Let's start with Acapana Pyramid, or what's left of it. It's a stepped platform, roughly 800 feet across, that may once have risen like a mountain temple. Today it looks like a big mound of dirt, but under the weeds and neglect lie precision-cut stones and sophisticated drainage systems. Yes, drainage, designed to funnel water through underground channels. Some believe it mimicked the flow of rivers or symbolized the cosmic mountain from Andean mythology. Historians still argue whether the pyramid was used for religious ceremonies, astronomical observations, or both. Or perhaps something stranger. Then there's the Kalasasaya, a massive stone enclosure aligned to the solstices. Step through its wide gateway and you'll notice the walls are lined with vertical stone pillars, each casting shadows at different times of year. It's been called a megalithic calendar, and it may be one of the oldest in the world. Now for the star of the show, the Gate of the Sun. This monolithic stone arch, carved from a single block of andesite, stands broken but defiant. At the top, you'll see a figure often called the Weeping God or Viracocha, flanked by winged attendants, clutching scepters, radiating symbols. No one knows for sure what it all means. Some suggest the imagery is astronomical, a solar calendar with 290 days etched into the stone. Others argue it's symbolic, representing a mythological tale of creation and flood. But fringe theorists? They go wild here. They see space helmets in the winged figures, laser precision in the cuts, and extraterrestrial influence written all over the iconography. Now let's talk precision. The stonework at Tiwanaku rivals that of Egypt or Cusco. Blocks of andesite and basalt, some weighing up to 130 tons, fit together with angles and joints that defy explanation. Modern engineers still puzzle over how ancient builders moved and shaped these stones, especially when you realize the nearest quarry was over 50 miles away. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some of the stones show melted edges, as if they were softened either by extreme heat, unknown tools, or some advanced technique we can't replicate today. A few blocks even have strange cutouts and protrusions, like they were once part of a modular system. Think ancient Lego, but on an absurd scale. Were they building components? Parts of a larger machine? Historians don't have a clue. The pieces don't even seem to match the structures we see today, which fuels the theory that Tiwanaku was dismantled, not destroyed. Maybe even repurposed. That leads us to Pumapunku, a nearby site that feels like Tiwanaku's secret cousin. Here, the stonework gets downright ridiculous. You arrive and immediately see the H-blocks, massive stone pieces carved into perfect geometric forms, each with complex recesses, grooves, and drill holes. These aren't your standard primitive carvings. They look like machine parts, like modular engineering, not religious symbolism. Some blocks show right angles within 1/1000th of an inch. That's modern machine shop territory. And yet, these were made with chisels? Stones? Maybe, maybe not. Fringe theorists have long argued that Pumapunku is the smoking gun of ancient high technology. Mainstream scholars counter that with remarkable craftsmanship using bronze tools and sand abrasion. You can decide how believable that feels when you're tracing your fingers along the edge of a flawless 90-degree cut in 100-ton stone. And speaking of the impossible, some believe Tiwanaku was once a port city. Yes, by the water, but the nearest shoreline is now miles away, and Lake Titicaca has changed shape over millennia. Did the water recede? Did the land rise? Or was this place built when the geography looked entirely different? That brings us to a bold theory, that Tiwanaku predates known civilization entirely, that it was built during the end of the last ice age, when the water levels were higher and humanity was supposedly still hunting mammoths. This would make it a relic not just of a forgotten culture, but of a forgotten earth. You lean against a sun-warmed slab of stone and close your eyes. The wind here tastes ancient, dust and granite, salt and time. There's something buried beneath these scattered ruins that isn't just architectural. It's philosophical. Question: what if civilization isn't a straight line? What if it's a wave, rising and falling, over and over? With each fall, memory erases itself, and only stone remains. You rise from the windswept stones of Tiwanaku, your fingers still tingling from the grooves in that impossibly perfect H-block. The sense that you've just touched something not meant for your time lingers like static. And then, like a shift in dream logic, your path curves across the Pacific. Far, far away now, on an island so remote it feels like a secret the ocean tried to keep, you arrive at Rapa Nui. You probably know it better by its western name, Easter Island. And yes, you're already picturing the heads. But there's more here than statues. A lot more. You step off an imaginary canoe just like the Polynesians did around 1200 CE, though some say they arrived much earlier. The island feels lonely. Volcanic ridges rise like jagged ribs from the earth. The wind howls like it remembers things you don't. And scattered all across the land are nearly 1,000 Moai statues, those towering heads with long ears, heavy brows, and a kind of moody standoffishness that makes you feel judged. Each one carved from volcanic tuff, each standing between 13 and 33 feet tall, though the tallest ever raised was a staggering 72 feet. These weren't lawn ornaments. The mainstream view is that the Rapa Nui people carved them to honor ancestors, symbols of power and connection to the gods. They were once placed on ahu platforms, elaborate stone altars, often near the coast. And they didn't just stare blankly into space. Many faced inland, watching over villages like stone sentinels. But the real kicker? The heads aren't just heads. You walk down a slope where one moai lies fallen, half buried. Excavations have shown that most of these statues also have bodies, complete with torsos and arms carved into the rock. Some are 30 feet underground, buried over centuries by soil, ash, and rain. It's like the island was slowly trying to swallow them back. Historians still argue whether the moai were meant to be transported upright, walked using ropes and balance, or laid flat and dragged. All theories have problems. The terrain is rocky, the statues are top-heavy, and some weigh over 80 tons. Again, no wheels, no pulleys, no cranes. One popular theory says the statues were moved by teams pulling and rocking them side to side, essentially walking stone giants across the land. Experimental archaeologists have managed small versions of this, but it doesn't explain the scale or how the Rapa Nui avoided tipping them into oblivion every few feet. Your quirky tidbit for the night? According to oral legends, the moai walked themselves, moved by mana, a sacred spiritual energy. The chiefs or priests who commanded this power could animate the stones, making them glide across the island. A myth, sure, but one that might hint at some forgotten ritual science. And it's not just the statues. There's something else here, something even stranger. You make your way to Orongo, a ceremonial village perched on the edge of a volcanic crater. The cliffs here fall dramatically into the sea, and just offshore, 3 small islets rise from the waves like stepping stones to the horizon. This is where the Tangata Manu, or Birdman cult, held their competitions. Brave men would descend the cliffs, swim to the islets, and return with the egg of a seabird, all while avoiding sharks and drowning. Whoever succeeded first became the Birdman, a sacred leader chosen not by bloodline, but by daring. Why birds? Why eggs? Why cliffs and caves and ritual tattoos? Some scholars believe the Birdman religion replaced the ancestor worship of the moai builders after the island's society collapsed. Yes, collapsed. Because here's the dark twist in the story. Rapa Nui is a parable, an eerie mirror. The island once had dense forests, towering palms, rich soil, but over centuries trees were cut down, maybe for boats, maybe for moving statues, maybe for firewood. And eventually the ecosystem gave out. Soil eroded, crops failed, famine hit, civil war erupted, statues were toppled. Some were buried deliberately, and just like that, the great moai makers became a cautionary tale. But not everyone agrees. Some researchers challenge the deforestation story, arguing that rats, not humans, wiped out the trees. Others point to the ingenuity of the Rapa Nui terrace gardens, rock mulching, and water retention systems that suggest an advanced understanding of survival, not self-destruction. Historians still argue whether the Rapa Nui were eco-villains or eco-geniuses. Either way, something shattered here, and whatever knowledge was once passed down, about carving, moving, or empowering the moai, disappeared like footprints in volcanic dust. Oh, and we haven't even touched the Rongorongo tablets. These are wooden planks, covered in undeciphered glyphs, written in a style unlike anything else in Polynesia. Tiny figures, birds, fish, abstract shapes, all arranged in boustrophodon lines. Left to right, then right to left like a plow turning in a field. Only 24 authentic examples remain. Some think Rongorongo was a form of proto-writing. Others claim it holds astronomical codes, genealogies, or even the secrets of mana. No one's cracked it, not even AI. And here's where things get extra spicy. Some believe the moai aren't just monuments. They're markers, anchors in a grid, or maybe even receivers. After all, their elongated heads and sunken eyes almost seem designed to watch the sky. Were they communication devices? Celestial clocks? Warning signs? or just very large tombstones for people who liked a good challenge. You sit down near one of the moai, its face cracked by time but still watching. The wind smells like salt and moss. Seabirds cry in the distance. The horizon stretches unbroken for thousands of miles in every direction. You're alone, and yet not quite. These statues weren't meant to be seen up close. They were meant to be seen across generations. A message carved in stone, waiting for someone, like you, to stand in their shadow and ask, why? The sea air from Rapa Nui still clings to your clothes as you drift back toward the mainland, heart still echoing with the silence of those stone-faced giants. But tonight, you're not headed for another monument. You're going beneath one, and not just any monument. You arrive in Egypt, not at the pyramids, not yet, but underneath the mysterious Sphinx. Because what lies beneath may be stranger than what towers above. The Great Sphinx of Giza, all 240 feet of lion body and human face, gazes out over the desert with an expression you can't quite read. Maybe it's tired. Maybe it knows something you don't. Maybe it's just sunburned after 4,500 years. That's the official story, that it was built by order of Pharaoh Khafre around 2,500 BCE, possibly carved from a single limestone ridge during the same period as the second pyramid. But things get messy here, fast. Because while Egyptologists wave the Khafre theory like a proud flag, there's a growing body of fringe and not-so-fringe researchers who argue the Sphinx is much, much older. You walk up to one of the deep trenches carved around the Sphinx enclosure. It's quiet, except for a few buzzing flies. You run your hand along the weathered wall, where the limestone has been carved into undulating vertical ridges. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The enclosure around the Sphinx shows signs of erosion, but not from wind, from water. Now Egypt, as you may have noticed, is a bit short on rain these days. But back in the early Holocene, around 10,000 BCE, the climate was different. Wetter, more rain, possibly even monsoon-like conditions. That's the basis for the work of geologist Robert Schoch, who first proposed the idea that the Sphinx might predate dynastic Egypt by several thousand years. He argues the water-worn walls of the enclosure couldn't have formed in Khafre's time, but would fit perfectly with an earlier, wetter climate. Historians still argue whether this erosion was caused by ancient rain, groundwater, or good old-fashioned time. But if Schoch is right, it pushes the construction of the Sphinx back into a time when mainstream archaeology says Egyptians were still herding goats and figuring out baskets. And if that's true, who carved it? Because there's no known civilization from 10,000 BCE with the tools or engineering to produce something this grand. That's when your typical human was living in mud huts and worrying about saber-toothed cats. This is where things slip off the academic rails and crash headfirst into lost civilizations, forgotten technology, and the always creeping shadow of Atlantis. Let's talk tunnels. Beneath the Sphinx there are chambers. That's not speculation. It's been confirmed by ground-penetrating radar surveys done in the 1990s. Some of these voids appear to be unnatural, possibly man-made. One popular idea is the existence of a hall of records, said to hold ancient knowledge from a pre-Egyptian civilization, possibly even survivors of Atlantis if you want to go full Graham Hancock. The Egyptian government has always been cagey about what's down there. Requests to excavate the chambers have been denied or stalled for decades. That, of course, has only fueled speculation. What are they hiding? Is it just unstable ground, or something that rewrites history? Your quirky tidbit? In the 1930s, American psychic Edgar Cayce famously predicted that a chamber beneath the Sphinx would one day be found, containing records from Atlantis. His timeline was vague, the late 1990s, and the connection between Cayce and archaeology is shaky at best. But the fact that voids have been detected under the Sphinx makes it a little harder to dismiss completely. Even weirder, the Sphinx appears to have undergone multiple phases of renovation. Its head is disproportionately small compared to the body, leading some to speculate that the original head, possibly a lion or even a jackal, was recarved into a pharaoh's image much later. In other words, the Sphinx might be a repurposed monument from a forgotten past. You circle around it now, beneath the blazing Egyptian sun. Tourists snap selfies, vendors shout, but something about this place stays hushed, ancient, uncooperative. This isn't just a statue. It's a cipher. And one more thing, it faces exactly east. Its gaze meets the horizon at the precise point where the sun rises during the spring equinox. That kind of alignment isn't accidental. It hints at celestial awareness, a culture deeply connected to the stars. And the stars have secrets, too. Some believe the Sphinx's placement and proportions are part of a broader astronomical code. They say it was designed during the age of Leo, roughly 10,500 BCE, when the constellation Leo rose directly behind the sunrise on the equinox. If true, the Sphinx could be a marker, a kind of cosmic timestamp left by people we don't remember. At your feet, desert dust swirls like time's own hourglass. You sit in the Sphinx's shadow and feel something old. Something that doesn't care if you understand it. It was here long before you, and it'll be here long after. Maybe it's not guarding the pyramids. Maybe it's guarding memory. Or maybe it's just watching the sun rise and fall for the 100,000th time. Whatever's beneath it. Stone, secrets, or something stranger. One thing's for sure. It's not done talking. The dry heat of the Egyptian desert fades behind you as you drift south. Your mind still tangled in limestone riddles. Next, you find yourself on the misty, verdant shores of Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey, a place that's been flipping history books on their heads since its discovery. Imagine stepping into a stone circle so ancient that it predates the invention of pottery, metal tools, and even settled farming. That's Göbekli Tepe for you. A sprawling complex of massive T-shaped pillars, some over 18 feet tall and weighing up to 20 tons, carved with enigmatic animals and symbols. You can almost hear the echoes of the people who gathered here. What exactly? No one's quite sure. The mainstream timeline says Göbekli Tepe was built around 9,600 BCE, during the early Neolithic period. That makes it roughly 6,000 years older than Stonehenge and 7,000 years older than the Egyptian pyramids. But here's the kicker, this was before the rise of cities or even agriculture. The people who built it were, by all accounts, still hunter-gatherers. Historians still argue whether Göbekli Tepe was a religious sanctuary, a social gathering place, or some kind of astronomical observatory. It doesn't fit neatly into any box. You run your fingers over one of the pillars, tracing a carved fox with an eerie smile and a snake curling around a human figure. The craftsmanship is meticulous, even by today's standards. How did they manage such feats with only stone tools? Here's your quirky tidbit. The entire site was deliberately buried around 8,000 BCE, covering those massive stones with dirt and sand. Why? Some believe it was a ritual act, an intentional closing of a chapter, like a sacred book being carefully shelved. Others think it was to protect the site from erosion or enemies. But no definitive answer exists. You wander between the stone circles, feeling the weight of the past pressing down. There's no evidence of nearby villages or permanent settlements, which makes the amount of labor required to quarry, carve, and transport those pillars even more baffling. Göbekli Tepe challenges the long-held assumption that civilization must precede religious structures. Instead, some scholars suggest religion itself may have sparked civilization, the desire to worship and gather prompting humans to cooperate, innovate, and settle. It's a thrilling idea that the quest for meaning might have kick-started farming, city building, and technology. And the mystery deepens. The animal carvings on the pillars may encode cosmological information. Some researchers claim to have identified star constellations and celestial events represented in the art, though this remains hotly debated. Historians still argue whether these symbols hold secret knowledge about the ancient sky or are simply decorative. As twilight falls over the Anatolian plains, you can almost hear the voices of the people who built Göbekli Tepe, echoes from a time when humanity stood on the edge of a new era, creating monuments that defy logic and time. You take one last look at the pillars, their silent stories etched in stone, and you realize the oldest mysteries aren't buried in the past. They're carved into the bedrock of human curiosity itself. The cool Anatolian twilight fades behind you, and the stone foxes of Göbekli Tepe blur into shadow. But your journey isn't done, not even close, because now you're climbing higher and higher into the windswept heights of the Andes. Tonight, you're standing in Peru, at a place that doesn't just whisper mystery. It screams it from every precisely cut corner. Sacsayhuaman. Try pronouncing that out loud. It sounds a bit like sexy woman, and yes, you'll chuckle like every tourist does. But once you lay eyes on the fortress walls, the laughter fades. Fast. Before you stands a cyclopean puzzle, an ancient complex of limestone boulders, some weighing over 100 tons, fitted together with such precision that you can't even slide a piece of paper between them. No mortar, no gaps, just impossible geometry, snug as a puzzle cube, weathered by centuries and earthquakes, and still standing. You reach out and press your palm against one of the massive stones. It's cool, rough, silent. The surface is oddly smooth in places, almost melted. And that's when it hits you. This was not a haphazard pile of rocks. It's architecture on a level we still struggle to fully understand. Mainstream archaeologists believe Sacsayhuaman was built by the Inca in the 15th century. That's your official story. A ceremonial complex, maybe a military fortress, perched above the sacred city of Cusco. But here's where things unravel. The Inca themselves reportedly claimed that they didn't build it, they inherited it. They added to it, used it, revered it. But the older, deeper layers, the megalithic foundation, that, they said, was the work of the gods or a forgotten race. You follow the zigzagging walls, shaped in patterns said to resemble lightning or the teeth of a puma. Everything's symbolic here. Everything's aligned. The walls don't just look cool. They serve practical and seismic purposes, resisting quakes with their interlocking precision. Historians still argue whether the Inca possessed the engineering skill to carve and transport such massive stones, or whether they were working with foundations left behind by a pre-Incan civilization, perhaps the same one behind other Peruvian marvels like Ollantaytambo or Pumapunku. Which brings us to your quirky tidbit. Some stones at Sacsayhuaman have odd protrusions or nubs sticking out, little bumps or handles with no clear purpose. Were they part of the construction process? A code? A signature? No one knows for sure. But wait, it gets stranger. Scattered across the plateau are giant stone thrones, niches, and stairs that lead nowhere. One area, called the Rotadero, is a smooth rock hill with naturally polished slides worn by centuries of children and adults, skidding gleefully down its surface. Was it a playground? A ritual site? Ancient ergonomic seating? You can't help but laugh as you try one of the stone slides yourself. You feel the thrill, the mystery, the absurdity of it all. Then there's the story of tired stones. Massive blocks abandoned miles from the site, as if the builders suddenly packed up and left. Some believe they ran out of time. Others suggest a catastrophe or a change in power. And still others whisper that these stones were being shaped by technologies we don't yet understand. Laser cutting? Sonic vibration? Or, as the more fringe minds suggest, liquefied stone. That last one might sound bananas, but look closely. Some surfaces seem to flow like hot wax. Some edges are so crisp, so curved, that modern stonemasons admit, we couldn't do this with what we've got now. Not easily. And don't even get started on how these stones were moved. Rolling logs? Not with that terrain. Llamas? They're cute, but not forklift material. Rope and manpower? Maybe, but try coordinating hundreds of people to nudge a 100-ton rock up a hill and fit it like Lego. You'd lose friends fast. You sit atop one of the high walls now, looking down over Cusco as the sun sinks behind the mountains. The city glows golden. You feel the wind on your face. The past presses close here. Dense, heavy, uncooperative. Sacsayhuaman doesn't tell you its secrets. It just shows you how little you know. The stars begin to prick the sky above. The same stars the Inca watched. The same ones the people before them watched, maybe with dreams as strange and restless as yours. You close your eyes, letting the night breathe around you. Maybe some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Maybe they're meant to keep you wondering. The stars still shimmer above the Andes as you slip farther into the folds of time, and now you're heading west, farther west than ever before. Across the Pacific, past endless waves and volcanic arcs, to a place where myth meets megalith, and where the jungle has swallowed more secrets than it's ever given back. Tonight, you set foot in Nanmadol, The name sounds soft, almost musical, but what you see is anything but. Off the coast of Pohnpei, in Micronesia, lies a ruined city unlike anything else on Earth. 100 artificial islets constructed with thousands upon thousands of basalt columns, some weighing up to 50 tons. They form canals, temples, tombs, and even what appears to be a royal compound, all floating like a lost Venice in the ocean. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Nan Madol was the ceremonial and political seat of the Sautelur dynasty, which ruled Pohnpei until the 17th century. Archaeologists date the bulk of the construction to around 1200 CE, though some think it may have begun much earlier. But here's where it gets murky and mysterious, and let's be honest, totally bizarre, because how these basalt pillars, log-shaped, heavy, and incredibly dense, were quarried, transported, and stacked like Lincoln logs across ocean tides and mangrove swamp is still up for debate. There's no evidence of pulleys, no wheels, no draft animals, no written language to explain the process. And oh, did we mention? The quarry is on the other side of the island, as in 25 miles through thick jungle and across open water. You hop across one of the black stone bridges. The air is heavy with humidity and old stories. The ruins seem to rise from the water itself, eerie and geometric, resisting explanation. One popular fringe theory is that the basalt columns were transported using levitation, not by monks or cranes but by sorcery. Specifically, by two brothers from legend, Olasopa and Elisipa, who supposedly built the city with the help of flying dragons or magical chants that caused the stones to float through the air. You scoff, but not entirely. After all, the islanders still believe the place is cursed. Locals avoid the ruins at night. Boats drift too close, they say, and don't come back. Divers speak of eerie presences underwater, and explorers have reported electronic malfunctions and sudden, inexplicable illness. Your quirky tidbit? In 1907, a German administrator named Victor Berg tried to explore Nan Madol and loot the tomb of its high priest. Days later, he died under mysterious circumstances. Since then, the place has developed a reputation not just as haunted but as protected by something. Historians still argue whether Nan Madol was an empire's capital, a religious sanctuary, or a prison for political elites. The presence of tombs and bones suggests ritual significance, but the layout also hints at rigid hierarchy and possible exile of dissenters. A palace? A holy city? A warning? You step into the heart of the ruins, where walls rise 25 feet high and the sky seems to narrow. The basalt radiates stored heat, like sleeping dragons under your feet. You listen for echoes, but the silence is heavy, like the ocean is holding its breath. There's something disorienting here, like the geometry doesn't quite add up, like the city exists half in this world and half in another. The entire complex, according to some researchers, may have served as a stellar observatory, or a kind of oceanic clock aligned with lunar tides and celestial cycles. Its layout mirrors constellations, some say. But even the name, Nan Madol, translates roughly to space between, or intervals, which could refer to both the islands and time itself. Could it be that this sunken city once belonged to a civilization not yet understood? A people whose story drowned long before their walls began to crumble? You touch one of the pillars. It's cool, wet, barnacled. You imagine the laborers or the magicians who once moved these giants stone by stone to build a city on the sea. Maybe they hoped to rise above it. Maybe they knew it would be swallowed in time. As waves lap gently at the edges of the island, you feel something ancient watching. Not hostile, not even curious, just present. Like Nan Madol doesn't care whether you solve it. It just is. You step back onto your boat, the ruins receding behind you like a half-remembered dream. You don't have the answers, but for now you're okay with that. The moonlight schemes the water behind you, trailing ripples across the Pacific as you drift further into mystery. You're heading north now, into a landscape that hums with energy, both real and imagined. The tropical seas give way to dense forests, misty mountains, and the quiet precision of Japan's ancient enigma, Yanaguni. You don't expect to dive tonight, but that's where you find yourself. Slipping into a wetsuit, securing your mask, and plunging into the clear, turquoise waters off the coast of Yonaguni Island. At first, there's nothing but coral, soft sand, and scattered schools of fish. Then, just like that, the seafloor changes. Massive stone terraces loom out of the blue. Stairs, platforms, walls, a five-sided pyramid. Not coral, not natural rock formations, something else. Something deliberate. This is the Yonaguni Monument, often dubbed Japan's Atlantis. Discovered in 1986 by a local diver searching for hammerhead sharks, this submerged site has sparked one of the most passionate debates in archaeology. Is it a natural formation, carved by currents and tectonics? Or is it the sunken remains of a prehistoric city, built by a civilization lost to time and tide? Mainstream geologists argue it's just unusually symmetrical sandstone formations, shaped by millennia of ocean erosion. The sharp angles, the flat plains, the staircases, all the result of perfectly timed earthquakes and sea swells. Basically, nature showing off. But even respected scientists can't ignore the details. The right angles, the 90-degree corners, the carvings, some resembling animals, others like script. There's even a structure dubbed the stage, with a wide central platform and surrounding seats, like an ancient theater. You hover above it, bubbles trailing from your regulator, your heartbeat thudding in your ears. You've seen stadiums like this, but not underwater, and not estimated to be at least 10,000 years old, if it's man-made and predates the last ice age sea level rise. Historians still argue whether Yonaguni is the product of human hands or natural processes. If it's artificial, it means a civilization existed here thousands of years before accepted history says it should have. Your quirky tidbit? There are rudimentary roads between some of the features, as well as what appear to be megalithic anchors. Some divers even report seeing tool marks etched into the stone. One diver swears he saw a carving of a human face, 20 feet wide, gazing eternally through silt and salt water. And above the waves, local legends whisper of a lost land called Mu, an ancient Pacific continent said to have vanished beneath the ocean in a great cataclysm. Sound familiar? Think Atlantis, but with sushi. As you float deeper into the monument's corridors, you feel that same disorienting pull as Nan Madol. The structures seem too geometric, too regular to be coincidental. Your flashlight sweeps across parallel walls, perfectly spaced pillars, and what may have once been a large arched entryway. If the monument is indeed man-made, then it might represent the oldest known ruins on Earth, which is kind of a big deal. It would force a complete rewrite of early human history, suggesting complex societies existed before Mesopotamia, Egypt, or even Göbekli Tepe. And yet, no tools have been found. No bones, no pottery, just the stone itself, heavy with salt and time. You ascend slowly, decompressing both your body and your thoughts. Breaking the surface, you stare back at the waves. The sea keeps her secrets well. Yonaguni is a stone puzzle that lies somewhere between science and myth, and she's not talking. Back on shore, the locals smile knowingly. They've heard the arguments. They've watched the documentaries. But they still believe this place has a soul, a story, something ancient and powerful. You lie on the sand for a while, letting the stars dry your skin. The monument still churns below, silent and immovable. Some say Yonaguni proves nothing. But you can't shake the feeling that it proves everything, just not in the way we expect. You've surfaced from Yonaguni's watery maze, but the ocean's mysteries still cling to you like salt in your hair. And now you're drawn west, toward the vast Indian subcontinent, where scorching deserts cradle secrets as old as language itself. Welcome to Mohenjo-Daro, the ancient city whose name means mound of the dead. Sweet dreams, right? You squint against the harsh sunlight, the Indus River shimmering nearby, and there it is. A grid of sun-baked streets, dusty ruins, and red brick silence. It's oddly modern. Too modern. You're walking through an urban plan laid out like a SimCity map. Straight roads, rectangular buildings, even a rudimentary sewer system. Pause here. This city thrived around 2500 BCE, over 4,500 years ago. That's the same time the pyramids of Giza were going up. But while Egypt dazzled with pharaohs and tombs, Mohenjo-Daro had plumbing. Real fact time. Mohenjo-Daro is one of the crown jewels of the Indus Valley civilization, a culture known for its meticulous city planning, advanced engineering, and deep sense of order. Homes had private wells and bathrooms. Wastewater was channeled into covered drains. This wasn't just ancient, it was futuristic. But then, the deeper you wander, the weirder it gets. You pass the so-called Great Bath, a massive rectangular pool lined with brick and watertight bitumen. Was it for rituals? Purification? You imagine ancient citizens lining the stone steps, splashing themselves clean before worship or market day. But here's your quirky twist. No one knows what language these people spoke. Their writing system, etched on seals, pottery, and tablets, remains undeciphered to this day. Just short strings of symbols. No Rosetta Stone. No bilingual inscriptions. Just silence. And get this, historians still argue whether this was a peaceful society or something more controlling. No obvious palaces. No giant temples. No signs of military fortification. Did they govern by consensus? Divine rule? Or did something darker operate behind the brickwork? You stand on one of the wide avenues, ghost footprints all around you. Where are the statues? The heroes? The conquerors? You find none. Just the haunting suggestion that this was a civilization without ego, or one that erased its own. And now, the big mystery. Why did Mohenjo-Daro fall? There are no signs of conquest. No mass graves from battle. Some say climate change did it in drought, shifting river paths, a slow economic crumble. But others point to something more sudden. Scattered in certain layers of the site are bodies lying face down, as if struck by some catastrophic force. There are melted pots and bricks, evidence of intense, brief heat. Some early 20th century archaeologists even described areas of the city as radioactive, sparking fringe theories that still ignite forums today. Yes, you heard that right. Radioactivity. As if the place was flash-fried by something nuclear. Some go so far as to suggest ancient atomic warfare, citing eerie similarities to fallout zones. Sound wild? It is. And yet, you can't quite ignore the chill it sends down your spine. Your flashlight catches a small seal in a museum case, an animal, a horned figure in a meditative pose. People call it the Proto-Shiva, a possible link to later Hindu traditions. It stares back at you across time, placid and unbothered. The truth is, we just don't know. No one does. Mohenjo-Daro is too clean, too efficient, too inexplicably ahead of its time. And the way it vanished, quietly, completely, without even a bang, leaves only riddles in the dust. You climb the steps of a crumbled granary, and the horizon stretches wide. Empty plains where a vibrant civilization once thrived. The wind carries dust and stories that have never been told, maybe never will. And as the sun sinks over the Sindh desert, you can almost hear the ancient city whisper, "We were here, we were great, and you still don't understand us." The desert fades, and with it, the neatly stacked bricks and quiet dignity of Mohenjo-Daro. Now your journey takes a dramatic turn. A leap across oceans and millennia, landing you squarely in the sizzling highlands of Bolivia. You blink. The air is thinner here, crisp and biting. The altitude leaves your lungs reaching for breath. Welcome to Tiwanaku, where the sun scorches the stones by day, and the stars slice through freezing skies at night. You shuffle forward, boots crunching over broken earth. Before you sprawls a place so old, so strange, and so profoundly misaligned with everything we understand about ancient America that even the most seasoned archaeologists hesitate to draw conclusions. You're standing among the ruins of Tiwanaku, and beyond them, at the foot of the Andes, lies Pumapunku, possibly the most puzzling stonework in the Western Hemisphere. Here's your solid historical fact. Tiwanaku was the religious and cultural hub of a powerful pre-Incan civilization, peaking around 600 to 1000 CE. It stretched across Bolivia, Peru, and Chile, and influenced the mighty Inca themselves. But Pumapunku? That's something else. It's a stone platform, shattered and scattered, but still whispering secrets in the shapes of its blocks. You crouch beside one and reach out. Cool, precisely cut andesite, smooth as ceramic, some pieces weighing over 100 tons. They're shaped with surgical perfection. Grooves, 90-degree angles, interlocking tabs and notches. How? With what tools? That's the kicker. No metal tools have been found at the site. No wheels. No written records. And remember, andesite is harder than iron. So, naturally, theories have spun themselves into full myth mode. Your quirky tidbit? Some researchers claim that the stones weren't carved, but softened, molded into shape like Play-Doh using a now-lost plant-based technology. Imagine that prehistoric geopolymer science, something out of a sci-fi fever dream. Still, mainstream scholars aren't on board. They argue the shapes could be achieved with enough manpower, determination, and ingenuity. Sure, it would take years and hundreds of workers, but maybe? Historians still argue whether Pumapunku was a temple platform, a water cult structure, or something more abstract, like a cosmological map. Its orientation suggests celestial alignments, and some believe it was designed to mimic the stars. But here's where it gets even murkier. The dating of the site is all over the place. Some radiocarbon tests suggest construction around 536 CE, while earlier hypotheses proposed it may be up to 15,000 years old, predating all known American civilizations. That would mean advanced human settlement here during the Ice Age, a radical rewrite of New World history. You step between the stones, trying to match the notches, to visualize what the structure might have looked like. There's a strange harmony to the broken pieces, like a dismantled machine waiting for someone who understands how to put it back together. And then there's the Gateway of the Sun, a single monolithic arch nearby, etched with mysterious symbols and the image of a crying deity. Some say a sky god, others a solar figure. The gateway may have once tracked solstices, or acted as a spiritual portal. Local legend has a different story. According to the Aymara people, Tiwanaku was built in a single night by giants, aided by the gods from the sky. It was not a place of worship but a launching site, a meeting point between Earth and the stars. And when the cataclysm came, those gods left, and left everything else behind. Aliens? Giants? Lost high-tech cultures? You don't say it out loud, but standing there, with the wind whistling through perfectly carved channels and the sun casting laser-straight shadows, it's tempting to believe something more was at play. Not necessarily little green men with tool belts, but perhaps a version of humanity we've forgotten. One that understood things differently, saw stone not as heavy but obedient. One that passed through places like this not once, but again and again, leaving behind only puzzles. You walk out of Pumapunku with a pebble in your shoe and a headache full of geometry. Your path now loops higher into the Andes, toward the Incan heartland, but Tiwanaku will stay with you. It's not the brokenness of the ruins that haunts you. It's how precisely they were broken. The air grows thinner as you climb further into the Andes. Each breath a labor of love. Your legs ache, but you push forward because what lies ahead is one of the most surreal, jaw-dropping places on Earth. You round a bend and freeze. There it is. Sacsayhuaman. Try saying that 3 times fast. Locals joke it sounds like sexy woman. But there's nothing flirtatious about this place. It's raw power, frozen in stone. Perched above the ancient city of Cusco, this fortress, if that's even what it is, defies every expectation you've developed about primitive construction. You walk up to the first wall and your brain just stalls. These aren't bricks. These are massive megaliths, some weighing over 100 tons. And yet, they fit together like puzzle pieces. No mortar, no gaps. You couldn't slide a credit card between them if you tried. The stones aren't uniform. Each is a different size and shape, almost playfully irregular, but somehow they interlock perfectly. You run your hand along a cool granite block, tracing its strange curvature. How did they carve these? How did they lift them? How did they place them with this kind of precision? Real fact, the Inca, whose empire peaked in the 15th century, are credited with building Sacsayhuaman. They were undeniably brilliant engineers. They created roads, terracing, aqueducts. But even Spanish chroniclers in the 1500s wrote that the Inca themselves claimed these walls were built by an earlier people, a race with godlike abilities. That brings us to your quirky tidbit. Local legend says that the stones were made light as feathers using a plant-based solution. Apparently, If you rub the juice of a certain jungle plant on stone, it becomes so weightless it floats. Sound ridiculous? Maybe, but British explorer Percy Fawcett believed it. So did the conquistadors who heard the stories firsthand. Historians still argue whether Sacsayhuaman is a fortress, a ceremonial site, or something even stranger, perhaps a calendar or an astronomical observatory aligned with the solstices. The zigzag pattern of its walls mirrors lightning, or the teeth of a puma. Some say it wasn't defensive at all, but a representation of divine power, a literal interface between earth and sky. You step back for perspective, trying to take in the scope. The outer walls stretch over 1,500 feet. There are 3 layers, stacked like the Earth's own armor. Climb them, and you'll find towers, terraces, and mysterious underground chambers. Some now sealed, some rumored to run for miles beneath the city. And then the really eerie part, evidence of stone softening. Rounded corners where none should exist. Curved walls that hug each other like molten wax hardened in embrace. These aren't just stones placed together, they look molded. And yet, not a single wheel, not a single iron tool, not a single written instruction. You climb to a flat plateau and look out over Cusco, the ancient capital of the Inca. From here, the view is divine, and you get why they believed this city was the navel of the world. Lightning forks in the distance, echoing the shape of the walls below. You remember what we said at Nan Madol. Geometry doesn't lie. And here again, the stone speaks without words, without apology. Sacsayhuaman might not be as famous as Machu Picchu, but it feels older, feels heavier. You stand among stones that have weathered centuries, earthquakes, colonization, and they haven't budged. In fact, when a major earthquake hit Cusco in 1950, the colonial buildings collapsed. But these ancient stones? Still standing, solid, smirking. You imagine the people who moved these boulders, if they were people at all. Maybe it took an army. Maybe it took sound. Maybe it took something we've entirely forgotten. Or maybe, just maybe, they never really moved them. Maybe they called them into place. Night falls gently now, and the stars come out one by one. The Milky Way pours across the sky like spilled milk, a celestial river mirrored in the sacred architecture below. To the Inca, the cosmos wasn't just up there. It was here, in the stones, in the layout of cities, in the patterns of crops. Everything was connected. Everything had meaning. Even now, as you stand among these silent sentinels, you feel it. That stillness, that gravity, that unexplainable sense that someone knew more than they should have, and then vanished without leaving a manual. You lie back on the ancient terrace and close your eyes. If you listen hard enough, you swear the stones are humming. Or maybe it's just your imagination, stretched thin by altitude and awe. Either way, it's enough to keep you wondering. You descend from Sacsayhuaman with legs like jelly and a head full of questions you're not sure you want answers to. The mountains release you slowly, reluctantly, and the air warms again as you drift east, into the endless green of the Amazon. You expect trees, humidity, the buzz of insects. What you don't expect is geometry. From the sky, if you could float just a little higher, the forest reveals patterns. Straight lines, massive circles, perfect squares. Shapes that should not exist in a landscape ruled by chaos and vines. You've arrived at one of South America's least understood mysteries, the Amazon geoglyphs. More than 450 massive earthworks have been discovered, mostly in western Brazil, carved directly into the land. They're enormous, some up to 300 meters wide. Ditches, embankments, rectangles, intersecting lines. From the ground, they're impressive. From the air, they're mind-blowing. And they're old. Radiocarbon dating suggests they were built between 1000 BCE and 1000 CE. That's before the rainforest swallowed them, before Europeans even knew this continent existed. The forest didn't create them. It buried them. Here's your historical anchor. These geoglyphs are very real. Satellite images and deforestation efforts have made them impossible to ignore. They span an area of nearly 13,000 square kilometers. But no one knows who built them or why. Mainstream archaeologists suggest they were ritual sites, used for ceremonies or community gatherings. They note the lack of artifacts, No burials, no tools. Just earth rearranged with maddening accuracy. But your quirky twist? Some researchers believe the rainforest itself is not entirely natural. They think vast parts of it were engineered, planted, and curated by ancient peoples over thousands of years. An anthropogenic forest. A garden so advanced we mistook it for wilderness. Historians still argue whether the Amazon once hosted vast, urbanized societies, complex cultures that left no stone monuments, but sculpted the earth itself. Some point to the discovery of terra preta, or dark earth, a man-made soil that seems to self-replicate, nourishing crops century after century. No modern tech has been able to reproduce it. Imagine that, a civilization so in tune with nature, they altered an ecosystem the size of a continent and made it better. But where did they go? You trudge through the jungle, past strangler figs and poison dart frogs, until you find one of the glyphs, half hidden, half alive, as roots reclaim the lines. You can't tell if it's a square or a portal, a compass or a calendar, but it feels intentional. Some fringe theories go further, of course. They say the glyphs are messages, meant to be read from the sky, like Nazca, or they suggest energy fields, ancient ley lines. Some even float the possibility that the builders were not entirely human, or at least not alone. You pause at the center of a circle, trying to imagine life here. No bricks, no pyramids, just form and space embedded into the skin of the earth. It's eerily quiet. You feel watched, not by animals but by memory, because this is the part of history that doesn't make it into textbooks. The part where massive, intelligent communities vanish without a trace. Their secrets swallowed not by war, but by trees. You pull back a branch and spot a piece of charcoal embedded in the soil. Someone made a fire here, maybe 1,000 years ago, maybe more. It's a whisper of proof that someone lived here, designed here, dreamed here. You'll never know their name, but their architecture lingers not in stone, but in space. The jungle reclaims you as you walk out, the buzzing louder now, the air thick again. But your mind stays with those circles and squares, those careful lines hidden beneath a million leaves. There's a kind of genius in building something that can disappear and still endure. The jungle fades into low mist as you board a quiet boat that rocks gently on black water. You're no longer in the heat of South America. You've slipped silently into the mists of northern Scotland, where the air smells of salt, peat, and myth. The Orkney Islands rise out of the North Sea like ancient vertebrae, wind-scoured, treeless, but alive with stories. You've arrived at Skara Brae, a Neolithic village so well-preserved it looks like its owners just stepped out for a fish supper 5,000 years ago. You crunch across the gravel path and peer into a circular house. Stone walls curve around you like ribs. Inside, stone beds, stone shelves, stone hearth. Surprisingly cozy, kind of like an Airbnb if your host was a prehistoric druid with excellent taste. Solid fact time. Skara Brae dates back to around 3100 BCE, older than Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids. This was a real community with drainage, workshops, even a form of indoor plumbing. 8 houses connected by narrow tunnels, with evidence of jewelry, tools, and art. But why here? Why Orkney? A remote archipelago battered by North Atlantic storms. Historians still argue whether the Orkney Islands were spiritual centers or simply thriving settlements supported by rich coastal resources. Some suggest the people here were part of a much broader megalithic culture that stretched across Europe. You feel it now, that uncanny sense of shared architectural DNA. The same circular houses, the same obsession with stone, the same alignment to stars and solstices. And nearby, things get weirder. You hike past sheep-covered fields to find the Ring of Brodger, a massive stone circle, just as dramatic as Stonehenge, but far more mysterious. No one's quite sure how many stones there were originally, but 27 still stand, some towering over 13 feet tall. They form a near-perfect circle nearly 104 meters wide. It's older than your childhood pet rock by a factor of infinity. Here's your fringe-worthy tidbit. Some researchers believe these stone circles weren't just ceremonial. They were vibration centers, designed to resonate sound frequencies that altered consciousness. Ancient sonic tech. Anyone? The nearby Ness of Brodger adds even more fuel to the mystery bonfire. Excavations have revealed a massive complex of temples, workshops, and painted walls. A whole sacred landscape connected by causeways and alignments. It's like someone dropped an entire Neolithic university onto an island nobody thought mattered. And still no writing, no names, just precision, planning, and a clear sense that these builders knew something we don't. Standing at Brodger at sunset, with pink light stretching over moody hills and ancient stones casting long shadows, you can't help but feel time thins here. The wind rushes through the stones and whistles down your spine like a memory being remembered backward. People often assume prehistoric means primitive, but Skara Brae and its neighbors tell a different story. Of comfort, design, even aesthetic. These weren't brutish survivors. These were planners, architects, poets of stone and space. And then, they vanished, left behind structures that endured longer than empires. And, like so many others on your journey, they left no explanation. Just silence. You make your way down the coast, where waves slam against cliffs that haven't moved in millennia. Somewhere below, Skara Brae nestles into its sand dune cradle, keeping its secrets warm. And you wonder, not for the first time, if we're missing something obvious. Maybe we've overcomplicated everything. Maybe these ancient people weren't trying to worship the stars. Maybe they were trying to talk to them. You watch one final gull loop across the sky and vanish behind a standing stone. And for a moment, the world feels exactly the right size. You leave the misty cliffs of Orkney behind and drift eastward, through time and fog, toward a place where the border between myth and history grows impossibly thin. The Aegean Sea glistens below you like shattered glass, and somewhere in its deep belly lies a lost city that's haunted human imagination for over 2,000 years. Atlantis. Now, before you roll your eyes, yes, Atlantis is the granddaddy of ancient mysteries. The one fringe theorists and Disney animators can't get enough of. But stay with me. Tonight, we're not going full tinfoil hat. We're going full curiosity. You land softly in Santorini, a Greek island shaped like the rim of a cosmic teacup. Volcanic cliffs rise around a collapsed caldera, the broken heart of an ancient mountain that exploded around 1600 BCE in one of the largest volcanic eruptions in recorded human history. Real historical anchor. This eruption likely destroyed the Minoan settlement of Akrotiri, which some historians believe inspired Plato's account of Atlantis. Akrotiri was stunning. Multi-story buildings, vibrant frescoes, advanced plumbing, art that feels surprisingly modern. But when the volcano blew, it covered the city in ash and left behind a crater so massive it rearranged coastlines. Here's your quirky tidbit. Plato didn't describe Atlantis as a fairy tale. He said it was real, and claimed his ancestor Solon heard the story from Egyptian priests. Atlantis, he said, was a powerful island nation with concentric rings of land and water, advanced technology, and a hunger for conquest. Then came the floods, the earthquakes, and in a single day and night of misfortune, Atlantis vanished beneath the waves. Historians still argue whether Plato's Atlantis was allegory, memory, or myth. Some say it reflects Minoan collapse. Others believe it's an echo of even older civilizations, remembered across generations as a cautionary tale of pride and fall. You walk along the rim of Santorini's caldera now, volcanic stone crunching underfoot. The sea below is dark and deep, eerily calm. You imagine a thriving city once spread across these waters, ringed with canals, glowing with torchlight. Then, a sudden roar, a plume of ash, a tidal wave so high it could scrape the stars. You glance behind you, no statues, no ruins, just dust and wind. Atlantis, if it ever existed, is gone. But its story refuses to die. Pops up in places it shouldn't. Caribbean sonar scans, Egyptian temple texts, underwater anomalies off the coast of Spain. And always, there's the same pattern. A lost world wiped out, too advanced for its time. One of the more fringe theories suggests Atlantis wasn't a single place at all, but a kind of global culture, seeded across continents. Its remnants, scattered in places like the Azores, Bimini Road, Yonaguni. Each just a shard of a bigger puzzle we no longer have the box for. You sit near the caldera's edge and listen. The wind howls like it remembers. The sea laps against black volcanic stone, hiding whatever truths it swallowed. Maybe Plato made it all up. Maybe he exaggerated a real tragedy. Or maybe, just maybe, there was a time before time when humans built more than we've ever rebuilt since. Here's what you do know. Santorini is beautiful, dangerous, ancient, and haunted by a name it never claimed, but can't quite shake. You take one last look at the horizon, then close your eyes. If you listen hard, you swear you hear the sound of stone doors closing underwater, and the whisper of a city that dared to dream too high. You find yourself now beneath a vast sky, where stars seem to drift like lanterns on a slow-moving river. The chill of evening seeps into your skin as you walk across an endless plain that feels both timeless and impossible to place. Here, amid towering monoliths and silent earthworks, stands the final enigma of our journey, Göbekli Tepe. Discovered only in the 1990s in southeastern Turkey, Göbekli Tepe turns every assumption about human history on its head. This massive complex of carved stone pillars and circular enclosures dates back to around 9,600 BCE. That's over 11,000 years ago, long before farming, long before settled life, and long before the pyramids. What you see is stunning. Gigantic T-shaped limestone pillars carved with mysterious animals. Lions, snakes, vultures, and abstract symbols that seem part language, part ritual. These stones aren't just architectural. They're storytelling in stone, whispers from a dawn before history itself. Here's your mainstream fact. Göbekli Tepe was built by hunter-gatherers, not farmers. People who didn't yet farm or domesticate animals, yet somehow coordinated massive construction projects that would challenge some modern feats. The quirky tidbit? Some researchers believe Göbekli Tepe was a kind of cathedral on a hill, a place of pilgrimage and spiritual awakening that helped spark the shift from nomadic life to settled civilization. Others propose it was a giant obsidian trading hub, or even a prehistoric observatory aligned to the stars. Historians still argue what exactly Göbekli Tepe meant for early humans. Was it a temple to forgotten gods? A social glue that united disparate tribes? Or the birthplace of the very idea of civilization? You wander between the pillars, tracing the animal carvings with your eyes. The stone is cold and smooth, as if carved yesterday, not millennia ago. The carvings are alive, frozen in action. A scorpion ready to strike, a boar bristling with tension. There's no burial here, no obvious king or ruler, just these silent stones holding their secrets close. And then you remember how this entire site was deliberately buried, sealed beneath tons of earth. Who decided to hide it? Why? Maybe they feared the power it held. Or maybe it was a ritual closure, a way to preserve the sacred. You stand in the center of one of the circular enclosures, look up, and feel a connection that stretches across time and space. It's almost as if the builders are here with you, watching, waiting, whispering. The night deepens, and the stars blink like ancient eyes. You realize that Göbekli Tepe, more than any other place, shows us how little we really understand about the dawn of human history. How much knowledge has been lost, buried, or forgotten. It's humbling. It's exhilarating. And as you turn to leave, the stones seem to hum just a little, like a lullaby for the restless. You take a deep breath and let the mystery settle around you, knowing this journey isn't over. Because every stone, every story, every whisper from the past is an invitation. To keep asking, to keep wondering, to never stop chasing the mysteries science can't explain. The night winds down gently now, and you settle back, feeling the weight of history and wonder softly dissolve around you. You've traveled landscapes of stone and spirit, from the shadowed caves of Chauvet to the submerged ruins of Atlantis, touched the edges of worlds where knowledge and myth blur. Remember, these mysteries don't always come wrapped in neat answers. They come as questions, questions that stretch across time like threads connecting us to those who walked before us. Maybe they knew things lost to memory, or perhaps they simply dreamed bigger than we do today. Whatever the truth, these ancient enigmas remind us how vast, strange, and beautiful the human story really is. So as you drift off tonight, wrapped in the quiet hum of the universe, know that the past isn't finished with you yet. The stones still speak, the stars still watch, and the mysteries, they are waiting, patiently, quietly, for your return. Sleep well, dream deep, and until next time.